Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei had female Vali as his girlfriend part 4. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Nefarious doctor for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Let's start this video. The fallen Reiner was in Ria's body and checking herself in the mirror while trying on different outfits that ranged from cute to sexy. She was currently in a teacher's outfit and put fake glasses on. Mr. Haidu. If you need help or an extension on your assignment. She undid her shirt to reveal her red lacy bra. Perhaps you can persuade me to give you ONE. She could imagine Issei's face beat red and being excited at the act, if only it wasn't being given to the red-haired woman's body. Reiner changed back to her regular attire thanks to a quick clothing spell inside. I wish I could go find Issei, but Ophis had to wait until the games begin. What to do? What to do? She lays back down on the bed and notices Issei's desk. She looked at the photos on his desk and there were many with him, either with the guys or girls. The guys were having a gaming marathon with Azazel cheating to win and another showing Issei and Kiba graduating from their school. The girls on the other hand have multiple pictures ranging from Issei and Ria's, Issei with Akeno, Issei on a date with Asia and the church girls, or evening Issei and Kaneko eating ice cream together. She was sick of looking at the girls' photos with her beloved Issei and knocked them over until she gasped as she saw a picture shoved in the back of the desk. Reiner looked inside of the picture frame and saw that there was an old photo inside of it. She carefully opened it and her eyes widened as she looked at the photo. It was of Issei and her in the arcade making silly faces before smiling in the last picture. The two looked very happy together and Reiner unknowingly cried tears of joy as she saw the old picture of their date before putting it in her pocket. I swear I will make things right, Issei. I want to be with you and apologize for all of the pain I put you through. I've killed many humans in my old life, but being with you made my heart happy. However, my old false love for Azazel made me blind and only followed the orders that fool Donishik gave to me because of that stupid brainwashing spell. I do have to thank Ophis for giving me this chance to make things right. She thought back when Ophis and the Fallen first met. It was after Issei went into Juggernaut-driven. Ophis decided to speak to the spirit. Flashback. Ophis looked at the flame and was looking into the spirit's memories. She saw how the fallen woman was aware of Kakabiel's betrayal and planned for the town they were to be stationed in, but she was stopped by Kakabiel, who didn't kill her but put her under a brainwashing spell and showed Donishik how to use the spell to make the three females obey his orders. Donishik used the spell to make Reiner think she was in charge, when in actuality, he was the one in charge of the operation. However, that all failed when he was killed, which released the girls from the spell, but Kalwerner and Middle were already killed by Rias, while Reiner tried to plead for her life so she could be with Issei until she saw the look in his eyes. She knew her fate was sealed and all she wanted was another chance to see the smile that he gave to her while they were on that date. Ophis felt pity for the spirit and pondered how to help it. The nun. Asia Argento. She remembered that there was a spell that would allow her to place the soul inside of the sacred gear of the Twilight Healing. However, there was a catch that the Fallen could take over, but there's only a 1% chance that it'll happen. The Ouroboros dragon went to the girl at night and placed the soul in Twilight Healing, while she altered the memories for the Fallen to think that she placed herself in the sacred gear. Ophis watched the girl and noticed that little bits of the Fallen were starting to show in the nun, since she was getting more confident and didn't mind wearing revealing clothing as she was in the past. Before she would have blushed at the idea of putting it on, but it appears the Fallen's influence was affecting her mind. Eventually many months passed and the Battle of Trahixa took place where the god had to leave to go back to the dimensional gap, but in truth she saw a vision of Issei in a different city with a group of stronger women than the girls in the Gremory Peerage. So after the war, she left and kept an eye on the members of the Gremory clan. She noticed that as Issei kept going on his contracts, he and the widow named Mia and the residents of the inn were bonding with him quite well. Ophis smiles at the warm aura that Issei releases when talking with the girls. She then takes a look at the girls and notices that they were spending a lot of their personal time with unfamiliar men at their schools, while hardly spending any time with Issei. It wasn't until she noticed that they were insulting him and neglecting him while hurting his heart over and over again. Personally, she was disappointed in the girls that made her first friend have nightmares, and she would have comforted him, but the angel came and healed his dream while showing him her affection towards him. It was an interesting mating ritual that Ophis had seen plenty of times around the others and watched it on shows. She didn't understand it until she looked at a magazine under Issei's bed and went through his memories where she found a lot of information. By the time she was done with her research, she noticed there were a lot of things she didn't know about the female body. She noticed her body was similar to the white Nico's body and how tiny she was. She wanted a body similar to the more developed women's body, so she made her body more developed as the girls and added her own personal touch to it. Ophis looked in the mirror and fell in love with her new body and played with herself a little to get a feel for it. Let's just say she used the information she got from Issei to give it a good test run. After her tests with her body, Ophis looks back at the girls and notices Issei's disappearance until she finds him in Shinto Tito, where he was receiving lots of love and gives it back to the girls that he cared for. Ophis was happy that Issei was doing well and surprised by how much stronger he had become. She still wanted to punish the girls for hurting her first friend until he remembered the fallen angel from before. She went to Asia Argento and noticed that she had a different air around her. It was a few weeks after Asia and Ken broke up. Ophis saw the nun alone in the school and decided to approach her. Asia was alone in the club room and was shocked to see Ophis until the little girl hit her forehead with a pointer finger and Asia blacked out with her head hitting the desk. Ophis spoke into the ear. "Wake up. I know you can hear me." Asia's body moved a bit until she got up and opened her eyes to reveal them as a different color. Asia looked at Ophis and smiled at her. "To meet our Ouroboros dragon god, Ophis." Ophis looked at the girl before shaking the hand. "To meet you as well. Fallen angel Reiner." The fallen was surprised when she heard her name come out of one of the most powerful beings in the world. "How do you know my name?" Ophis pats her head and smiles. "I'm the one who put you in the sacred gear in the first place. Didn't you find it a bit strange that you were able to use a powerful spell to place yourself in considering you had no knowledge of it?" Reiner did find it a bit strange until she realized what happened to her. She looked at the dragon god and saw she wanted something from her. "What do you want from me? Trying to save this pathetic girl after what she did to Issei? If that's the case then hell no." Ophis waved off the insult. "No. I'm not here to help the girl. I'm here because I can give you something you desire." Reiner leans back in her body. "And what's that?" "Your own body of flesh and blood. With a few new features added to it." Reiner had her interest piqued and leaned forward. "I'm listening." Ophis smiles and reveals her plan to the fallen. The plan is to use a blood ritual to allow you to use the girl's body to give birth to your new body, but the process requires another body to act as a blood transfer to create the new body. We can use the girls from the rest of the peerage to give your new body the powers of not just twilight healing, but also the power of destruction, senjutsu, holy lightning, holy powers, wielding holy swords, and your own fallen abilities. She even produced 2 other feathers, and Reiner recognized them as Middleton Calriner's feathers. "I want to punish all 6 of them, so I let you summon your 2 friends into the bodies of the other girls and let you 3 be among the realm of the living, while also getting revenge on the girls. I'm in love with Issei and want to make the children suffer for their actions. All I ask is this, are you interested? This is a one-time offer, after today the deals are off." Reiner thought about it and remembered how the red-haired woman always stood as if she was an almighty woman when Issei fought the battles. The thought of breaking the prideful woman to a crying girl made her very happy. She looked at Ophis and said the words that Ophis wanted to hear. "I'm in." The partnership between the dragon god and the fallen has begun. A few months later. Ophis and Reiner have brought back Calriner and Middleton to the world of the living, as the 2 were getting used to their new bodies, while the other girls were still asleep, oblivious to the plan being talked behind their backs. "Now listen. Now that you 3 are back in the world of the living, it's time to begin the next part of the plan. Creating your bodies." The interesting part of the lab was that there was a program that could create clones of anyone, whether they are human, animal, or supernatural. They could also create a new body from scratch, but it required DNA. Luckily they had the feathers to create the bodies to suit the fallen. The 3 feathers were placed in separate chambers and they needed a body to scan the correct proportions for the new bodies. They wanted one that had good proportions, so they decided to do Akeno, since she had a bigger bust than any of the other girls. The machine scanned Akeno's body and the feathers sunk into the clay bodies that were being made by the device. They began as lumps of clay, but then a needle came out and inserted themselves into the 3 girls and drained them of their blood. It was set to a liter so it wouldn't kill the donor. The bodies began to take on a flesh-like form and the physical features began to show as breasts began to grow and hair appeared on the head. Each of their new bodies were around Issei's age, while they had a mature look to them. The eyes, ears, nose, and mouth appeared on the body's new faces. Middle has starry eyes as her new body was formed and she was so happy that she could finally have a mature body that she can test on a man who'll be able to rock her world. Calriner liked her new body forming and played with Irina's breasts a bit while enjoying the view of the flush daughter of the great Brachial. Oh, how disappointed he would be if he found out that his daughter is a true masochist. Reiner saw her body through the nun's eyes and remembered that they would be born by sacrificing one girl to give birth to her new body while the other is drained of magic. She looked at the Grimoire heiress's body and smiled at her as she focused on the seal she placed on her soul before Asia's body collapsed while Ria's body shook a bit until she lifted herself up to reveal her new eyes. Ophis looked at her and pondered why she would leave the nun until Reiner repeated the process of draining Asia's blood that was mixed with the other's blood and inserted itself. She looked at Ophis and shrugged her shoulders. I wanted to be in a more mature body and imagine the look on Ria's face when she realized that the same fallen that she killed is the same one who'll possess her body. Ophis was surprised by the fallen's inner sadist and agrees that it would be amusing to see her state of shock when everything is revealed to her. Then flashback. Reiner laughed as she thought back on all of the memories over the past month of pretending to be Asia Argento and now being Ria's Gremory. Honestly, it was much easier for her to pretend to be the brat than the innocent nun. All she had to do was act more prideful than before and make herself seem like a big shot. She walked out of her room and pondered where Kalwerner and Middlet were in the giant mansion. Honestly, she was surprised by how Issei was able to navigate himself in such a spacious mansion. How did he even get around here? She went to the third floor and heard something coming from the inside of one of the rooms. Reiner saw that Middlet was playing with Kaneko's body and the two of them were having so much fun that they didn't even notice Reiner come in and take a picture for blackmail material. She quickly snuck out of the room and left the hall while laughing to herself at the material she now has in her possession. She did ponder where Kalwerner was and remembered that she wanted to test her durability, so she went to the gym that was installed in the home. When she got there she found a sight that truly both shocked her and slightly turned her on. Kalwerner was in a dominatrix attire with a whip that was made of leather and gave a sickening crack at the end with a devil's tail at the end. She looked at her playmate while having a look on her face. The fallen sat on a makeshift throne and asked the girl in front of her. Who is your mistress? And to whom do you serve? Zenovia was licking Kalwerner's feet and had a look on her face that said she enjoyed being treated the way she was now. She was no longer the proud knight of the Gremory Peerage or the wielder of Durandal. She was just Zenovia. Kalwerner's personal plaything and sex toy. Zenovia looked at her mistress and panted before saying, "You are the greatest, Mistress Kalwerner. I'm just Zenovia, your slave who enjoys being your pet. Punish me more." She wags her to Kalwerner and she compiles by using her whip and hitting her back and then switches her hand to the former exorcist who was panting from that coursed through her body. Zenovia loved being treated like she was nothing more than an object of humiliation. It made her quiver in joy to be put to use by her master. Reiner continued to watch this and she didn't complain with what she saw and wished she thought of doing this earlier. Reiner left Kalwerner to her own devices and wondered how to kill time until she remembered that Ria's planned on meeting up with her boyfriend today. Ugh. That leaves a bad taste on my tongue. Reiner looked at her phone and saw where they were meeting up. Huh. Ironic that I'm meeting him in the shopping district. The same place where I went on my date with Issei. Suddenly she had an idea to see who Ria's boyfriend really is. She just had to ask for a favor or two. At the red light district. Reiner may have good looks, a kind attitude, and a natural charm with the ladies, but there was one flaw he had that not even his brothers knew about him. He's a serpent. He enjoys manipulating women with honey-sweet words and robbing them of all they have before breaking up with them. When he was approached by both Rias and Akeno, he hit the gold mine because two powerful people and both are beautiful and gullible women. How could he not take advantage of them? His sacred gear was a big help since it allows him to create clones of himself. All he had to do was to create a clone with his memories and mannerisms to satisfy both of them, so while they spent time with the sugar mamas, he could reap the fruits of his labors. Right now, he was going to take the next step with Rias and take the one thing he always enjoyed breaking. Her first time. Alone. In a hotel. After having a good time with the Crimson Honeypot, then he could continue his act, steal the wish from her, and put him on a pedestal higher than Issei Haidu, and no one, not even his brothers, can get in his way. He wanted to go instead of a clone. Little did he know, it would be the last mistake he'd ever make. Rias had met up with them and they did a classic date from a show. A trip to the arcade, a movie, dinner at a diner, before moving to a jewelry store where he kept in touch with a jeweler who gave him discounts on the necklaces that he gives to all of his girlfriends that he's dated. He was surprised that the Gremory girl never caught on to his act, but her naivety is what made her so gullible and ripe for the picking. And without Issei to guard her or Akeno from any other men, they were like sheep to a shepherd. Classic manipulation at its finest. They just finished up and Rias had her sexiness tripled to a much R margin and brought him to a special hotel where she spent a good penny to give him a wonderful first time. Reiner saw her eyes and liked it so he went along with it. After Rias went to the bathroom, Reiner created a clone and told it to add a special drug to her drink to make her extra tipsy. The clone did so but never returned, not that he cared. The clone would disappear if it ever got into a fight. It was weak and frail, so pathetic. Rias came out in a sexy two-piece with red that made her body look even more enchanting than it already was. Reiner was happy and controlled his boner before making himself presentable before offering her a drink with the special ingredient. Rias took it and drank it with Reiji before she downed it and then ed Reiji. He was taken in shock that his mouth was wide open to the substance that she made sure to shove in his mouth. Reiji pushes her off of him and feels dizzy immediately. He tried to steady himself, but he couldn't balance himself. Reiji tried to get Rias to help him, but a cold smile frightened him as her devil wings were out and her right hand created a ball of her signature power of destruction, while her left generated a stream of holy lightning that made his skin crawl, and he wasn't even a devil. Rias, what are you doing? He tried to reach out to her, but a hand caught it. His eyes widened as he saw his clone glare at him with hatred in its eyes and threw him back on the bed. The clone looked at Reiji and looked at Rias. You'll keep your promise, won't you? Rias nodded. I always keep my promises. Now do what must be done. Clone Reiji looked at his old self and stabbed him and moved around in it until he found what he was looking for. Reiji's sacred gear went into the clone and it laughed as he now felt complete. It seems that the creation of its master is the new master in charge. Don't worry fake Reiji, I'll make sure to keep up your act. But as for you, farewell. Reiji's eyes closed as he took his last breath and died from his own clone and creation. He never saw it coming. Rias looked pleased until she put a hand on the clone and the clone collapsed on the floor. Rias put a spell on the clone and it stood back up before bowing to his master. I'm at your command Lady Reiner. Ria's eyes changed back to Reiner's eyes as she smiled. The Fallen now had a pawn that would be excellent for the game and for surveillance missions. She made her move. Now it's all up to the others to see how this game plays out. Reiner inwardly sighs as she prepares to train for the next 2 months. Soon Issei, we'll be back together and I'll make sure that she confesses her actions and misdeeds to the entire world before I kill her. I know you won't do anything to stop me since you'll be more than happy to see her fall. Reiner burns Reiji's body with holy lightning and she and the clone depart ready to train for the games. Rias and the others had been preparing for the games since they couldn't be slacking even though Issei was missing. They hoped to see him in the games because he didn't want to disappoint the children of the factions. Issei and always enjoyed being an idol for the children to give them hope and a voice so that their opinions mattered against those who didn't care about the little guys and their voices. It's also why many members of different factions enjoyed being around Issei. Granted he was a pervert and a funny person. He was always one who fought without any form of hesitation and always helped those who needed it even at times they didn't know they needed help with their issues. It was how Issei helped Kiba, Akeno, Kaneko and many others with their fears and past that haunted them earlier in their lives. Without him, it seemed like the club team lost their pillar of support and strength, but now wasn't the time to dwell on the past. They had their roles to fulfill, and the team wasn't filled completely, but they made do with what they had. Rias was still the king of the peerage, while Akeno remained the queen. The two had been working on their physical strength since Azazel pointed out that they relied too heavily on their magic and not on strengthening their bodies. So the two have been going under harsh physical strength exercises and training to become stronger. Their magic grew as well, but they were proud of their growth in their weaknesses. Asia and Gasper were training their bodies and to use their sacred gears for longer periods of time and using less magic. Asia was still shy in battle, but her magic increased in healing speed and strength. Gasper was told what happened, and while he didn't want to join his team in the games, he had no choice since he wasn't a leader, nor did he have a peerage. The two bishops were ready. As for the knights, Zenobia and ironically Irina were the knights. Irina confesses that she had fallen and that she was no longer a part of Michael's peerage, so Rias decided to make Irina her second knight. The two had grown stronger but were still able to work as a good duo. The rooks were just Kaneko since Roswas still hadn't returned yet. It would be too late and Rias feared Roswas wouldn't be in fighting condition, so she didn't call the Norse faction. As for the pawns of their team, the team was able to take up all 8 pawns surprisingly. Hijama was able to get a better understanding with his sacred gear. Tome of Magic. He was able to make his reserves on par with a low-tiered mid-class devil. He hasn't achieved his balance breaker yet, but he was close. He took 2 pawns. Then took 2 pawns and was able to unlock his balance breaker. He learned how to fight while also using the healing powers to aid him in combat. The horse was easy to control, and after learning from some books how to ride war horses, he got it down after some hard work. Reiji took 1 pawn, and he was able to make good use of his clones from his false gift to attack, infiltrate, and distract his opponents. He wasn't good with magic, so he had to rely on hand-to-hand. Ryudra was able to master his sacred gear's base form, but his balance breaker was weak and he couldn't hold it for a long period of time. He took 1 pawn. Lastly was Saoji, who took the last 2 and was able to achieve balance breaker. He hasn't had much combat experience other than sparring, so he didn't know how long he could hold it against more powerful opponents. All in all, they made decent progress in the past months. And today was the day they would see the fruits of their labors. Rias and the others were in the teleportation level of the mansion. Alright everyone, I'm proud of all the hard work you've all done over these past few months. I know it's been difficult for many of you to get stronger, especially since we lost a good friend of ours. But I believe we will see him again. For now let's focus on winning this tournament. Everyone ready? Yeah. Rias nodded and activated the teleportation circle. The team vanished, but unknown to them there were 3 individuals who were waiting for this time to come. Asia's eyes turned purple and narrowed at Ria's back. Enjoy your last few weeks as an independent woman, Rias. You're about to learn the old human saying. Revenge is a dish best served cold. Hopefully, Calwerner and Middle remember the plan and don't screw it up. We only have to make it to the final 4, which means we'll have to work as hard as we can to make our way there despite being in these bodies. I'll stay in Asia for now, but for you, Rias. Reiner looks at Ria's stomach and sees another empty body that is resting like an infant. Reiner inwardly smirks at her. Enjoy birthing me back into the world and giving me your life. I wonder how the others are faring. The Keno didn't notice her hands moving to her bottom, and her left hand groped her as the soul within her and enjoy, before secretly using her right hand to play with her right breast, making her ecstasy. Middle was still so happy to finally have a beautiful body that was all hers. Now she just needed to wait for the right time to begin the ritual. She looked at Kaneko through Keno's eyes and wanted to see the little cat beating up Issei. That guy helped you overcome your fear because you're nothing but a coward who hides behind others. When the going gets tough you turn and run with your tail between your legs. I can't wait to skin you and make you feel true fear. Please note this happened inside of Akeno's head while they were teleporting. Calwerner ended up imagining one of her fantasies with Issei. The two are in bed and both are as the day they were born. Calwerner was shy as she looked away from him. Issei, we can't do this. I'm a dirty fallen woman. Issei gently sees her and the two end as Calwerner wrapped her arms around his neck and wanted to stay in the position longer until the lack of air made them pull away from each other. Issei take out handcuffs and cuffed Calwerner's feet and hands to their bedposts as Issei slowly took off his undergarments and Calwerner's eyes almost jumped out of her head as her mouth opens and her tongue came out as she panted at the long weapon in front of her. Issei crawled over her and lowered his weapon to her maidenhood, then he slowly showered her stomach to her with peppers that made her in joy and excitement. Issei looked eyes and gently cupped her left cheek. Don't worry Calwerner, I'll be gentle. They didn't leave the room for the rest of the day, but then they left the room. Calwerner couldn't walk very well and Issei looked slightly drained but fit as a fiddle. Calwerner chuckles as her nose drips blood from her perverted fantasies. Irina's body was getting turned on as multiple impure thoughts and deeds went into Irina's mind and her mind knew almost every position in sex. Irina pictured herself and Issei doing the deed over and over again until she was pregnant with his babies. The three were wishing the fights would end quickly so they can be with the one they have fallen for, but Ophis' instructions echoed through their heads as they remembered the plan. If they screwed up, then game over and people would get suspicious. Flashback. Ophis looked at them the night before the big tournament and they went over the plan one last time. Remember, you can't use the other powers you've gained from the process. We have been able to place your new bodies in the girls who will be the ones to give birth to her. Rias will hold Reiner's body while Akeno holds Middle and Irina holds Calwerner's body. In order for the ritual to be a success, you must be in the body that gives birth to you. So Reiner, why aren't you in Ria's grimoire? Reiner smirks in Asia's body. Simple. I want to see her face when she's broken down into despair before I steal her life away from her. Imagine her crying from despair. Oh, it makes my heart tingle in excitement. Ophis nods and informs her that she will make sure the grimoire team makes it to the final 4. We need them in the final 4. It's the only chance we'll have to launch my personal game. A dark grin appears on her face. Let's see how strong the grimoire peerages truly are without their dragon to defend them from harm. The girls shuddered as they remembered the game that Ophis had in mind and it even gave them nightmares. Then flashback. Shinto Tito. Issei was getting his gear as he prepared to fight in the tournament. His battle attire was created by Matsu and Kacho. The suit was tight but comfortable at the same time. It regulates the internal body temperature of the user by scanning the external temperature and adjusting on the go. He wore a red and black leather jacket that had the Sekirei symbol on the back, as well as jeans and boots that were able to attach to any surface, whether it was rocky or slippery. His fingerless gloves were a way for him to summon his fire powers without burning himself. Issei went to the others and saw they were getting ready for the fight of their lives. Issei had made sure that there wouldn't be any issue at MBI for the tournament. There were others in Shinto Tito who were even excited for the Azazel Cup and wanted to watch it, so Matsu and Kacho made sure the residents could tune in and watch the action. Mia and Yum approached him, and the others nodded as they were ready. A whirl happened outside as Issei and his team left the inn and saw one of the crazy scientist's personal projects. Apparently, Matsu and Kacho were big fans of the Avengers and so they decided to create the Helicarrier. Undine wanted to go with them so she could meet her grandparents, which Issei agreed as long as she was on her best behavior. Issei was wondering about his family's reaction to his change, but down he knew that they would be happy for him. That's the kind of parents he had. During their training, all of them had been learning how to use their powers better and utilize new armor, weapons, and techniques to make up for their weaknesses. Mia was one who had issues with using new weapons since she was skilled using the sword sets, but after some convincing, she was able to learn how to use a handgun to fight. Yum has learned how to harness her light powers to blind her opponents and create powerful orbs of light to punch and use similar to Issei's dragon shot. The knights of Issei's team had been improving their armor and their weapons to increase their arsenal. Parasuba was already a force to be reckoned with and her dragon form made her much stronger and faster. The only thing she had to work on was her overconfidence and training in using armor when she fights. Aiha, Yomi, and Toyotama were warriors who were over-reliant on their weapons, so Issei made sure they received CQC training to fight in case they lost their weapons. Yomi was able to better use her wind powers and abilities to side her opponents. Kaiha and Toyotama were taking extra lessons when it came to weapon smithing and training to give them a fighting chance against more powerful ones. The bishops were taught how to use their physical strength and combine it with their elemental abilities. Kagari was the only one who had no difficulty, but the others were a bit hesitant since they mostly relied on their powers for a longer period of time, but Kagari explained that it would help them in the long run. So after some harsh training, they managed to get a better use of their powers and abilities. The Rooks were actually the team that required the least bit of help since Benitsubasa and Ichiya were able to get better in speed and CQC, but Yuzum and Yashima were in trouble since their powers were weak against other types of opponents. Yashima's power required her hammer to help her control her gravity powers, while Yuzum's cloth abilities could only work on a person if she touched them, and it's really a good card to use against close-quarter opponents. Which is why Yuzum learned how to use her fabric abilities to make even harder fabric that could cause more impact on her opponents. She even learned how to control another's clothing, but she has to touch it in order for it to work. The pawns were each different in their own unique way. Heihain, Ureha, and Yahin were more of weapons and an elemental user, so Heihain had to take classes on how to help her overcome her clumsiness, and Ureha was able to get an understanding of her blades. She carried extras with her and had to train in using her telepathy to get the blades out of the ground when jammed into it. Yahin wasn't much of a fighter, she was more of a ninja. One who relied on stealth and trickery, so she did research on weapons that ninja used, and thanks to Matsu and Kacho, they created new gear and weapons for her to fight with. Lastly were Pandora and Panacea. The problem with Panacea was that she needed to learn how to properly control her plant-based abilities since they increase in power due to her emotions. It's a tricky power, so Issei had her practice growing flowers and healing people's injuries. She could heal them physically, but the problem was that it also took some energy from the person which made them hungry. Pandora didn't have any wicked abilities besides her fortune-misfortune powers. She thought she would be useless in a fight, but Issei told the Sekirei that out of all of them, she had the most potential to grow, so she could learn how to use her powers and new skills to help her grow. Physically, she was excellent with self-defense and durability-wise, she was able to block a good punch from Benitsubasa, but it hurt afterwards. Magic-wise, she was able to perform what would be called magic tricks, but there was one power she found out she had an affinity with. Compression. She got the idea from watching MHA and saw a villain called Compress. She tried learning how to compress with her magic, and after focus and training, she was able to use it on small objects and people, but only if she touched them. Her weapon of choice was a combination of armored gauntlets and a pair of handguns that had different elemental bullets. Water, air, fire, gravity, and ice. She was able to get better aiming and learned how to use a sniper rifle, which made Caitlyn take her on as her apprentice. Speaking of Caitlyn, she and Takami were actually really fitting well into married life. They were used to living together, and Takami decided to learn how to be a stay-at-home mother since she didn't want to make any mistakes with her child like she did with Minato and Yukari. Her children were happy for their mother and enjoyed rekindling their relationship with her since she missed out on so much due to their late father. MBI was able to learn that there was a way for both of them to have a child, so Takami decided to take on the role of the one to give birth, while Caitlyn was the overprotective husband. The sniper Sekirei actually got a job working as a teacher in self-defense courses to help Ashikabi and Sekirei learn how to protect themselves. Issei did check up on them from time to make sure they've been well. Luckily, there weren't any issues but excellent news. Takami and Caitlyn wanted Issei to be their child's godfather, which he was more than happy to accept. All in all, life was looking up for the civilians of Shinto Tito. After getting all of their gear together, all of them headed into their transportation and took off to their destination. Issei saw many of the residents of his territory cheer them on as they ascended into the air. Oh Issei Haidu. Pick there and win. Sakurai and Ashikabi, forever. A red dragon. Issei. 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 Issei smirked as he looked at and raised his fist into the air and shouted. It is not just me who'll be fighting, but also my peerage and loved ones, so cheer for us, and we will show the world the strength of the Sakurai and Ashikabi. Are you with me? The residents' response. Yeah. Let's show them how it's done. They all waved goodbye to their home as they made their way to the underworld. Azazel Cup Arena. Azazel was getting his best announcer suit on and made his way to the arena. He was a cadre class fallen who took on Trihex and many other threats, but now he was getting nervous for some reason. Is it because of Issei's introduction? I do ponder where Ophis is though. She's been MIA for a while now and I can't exactly make a phone call to the dimensional gap, but I can't think about it now, so I should focus on what's in front of me. This ratings game. Azazel shook off his worry and got to the center. He saw many people in the stands. Men, women, and children who came out to see the best of the best compete and try to take the #1 spot. He was able to see many people from different factions, but the one that caught his eyes was the VIP section where Issei's parents were seated. Issei's father was excited and getting into the spirit of things, while Mrs. Haidu was excited but also worried about her child. Azazel couldn't blame her. After hearing what happened to her soon, he learned why women were more terrifying than even Trihexa itself, but after she saw how much her boy had grown in Shinto Tito, she was happy to see him become better and never lost his smile. Truly that made her happy, but she still wanted to attend the wedding. Now her son gets to show the world that he's back and better than ever. Hey Azazel. We're almost here. Azazel smirked as it was time for probably the most baddest entrance ever in history. It was time to welcome back a hero. Azazel went to the center of the stadium and tapped his microphone to get their attention. Ahem. Now then. Welcome everyone to the first ever world-class rating game. Which means anyone can enter whether they're a human, devil, fallen, or even a god. This is the first ever Azazel Cup. Some people in the audience were wondering about the name until Azazel put down their concerns. The name was decided by a unanimous vote and even my pals Barkwheel and Ajuka backed me up. Right, guys. Ajuka and Barkwheel looked away and whistled so they wouldn't get involved until Azazel went back to commentating. Man, tough crowd, am I right? Everyone laughed at the joke and focused on the fallen. Now I know some of you, especially those in the special seats, are wondering where Issei Haidu the Red Dragon Emperor is. Well, I can tell you that he went through some serious training and gained a powerful peerage as well as a new one before he gets here. I would like to announce some new places that have been installed in the underworld for all to enjoy. The new updates are the new ways for families and friends to enjoy themselves. We have a couple of manga cafes which allow anyone but 18 or older for the more mature mangas and to enjoy some lunch or a quick breakfast to start their day. There's also a section where you can watch multiple different types of anime. You can pay to stay there for 24 hours and still use the facilities such as the shower stations and the restrooms themselves. Next we have pachinko parlors. There is basically a casino where an arcade is installed on the second floor so the teenagers can enjoy themselves while the adults are having a good time with their chips. The last item on the B buildings list is that for the first time ever the underworld has an amusement water park. That way families can enjoy some thrill and or water rides. All rides have been tested safe and family friendly. So who likes these updates? Alright. Yeah. Azazel was almost blown away by the cheers. Wow, they must really like the new additions to the underworld. Suddenly a gust of wind blew into the stadium and everyone looked up to see the transport. Azazel smirked as he covered his eyes to see. Now here he is, everyone. The person you've all been waiting for. Issei was in his suit and still felt warm thanks to adjustments Kacho made to it. He looked down at the stadium and smiled at the crowd. Alright Drag, now do it. Drag smirked as he yelled. Welsh Dragon Balance Breaker. The armor appeared on Issei as he unfurled his wings while Kazuhana and Kagari prepared to spice things up. Presenting this generation's Red Dragon Emperor. The son of the dragon gods Great Red and Ophis. The main character of his hit TV show Draconic King of the Winds and Wings. The ultimate class devil himself. Issei prepared his wings. Issei Haidu. Issei leaps out and Kazuhana along with Kagari form a fire tornado that surrounds Issei as he descends to the ground before coming to a complete stop on the ground and using his wings to fan the tornado. Making it burst in streams of fire that made his power glow in amazement. Everyone was shocked to see the new Issei Haidu as he took off his helmet and walked over to Azazel and asked for the microphone. Azazel gave it to him and Issei faced everyone in the crowd and smiled his warm grin that destroyed all of their fears as worries. Now I would like to say that it's good to be back home. I am Issei Haidu, but during my training I've grown from the person I once was, but action speaks louder than words, so watch me in the Azazel Cup and I'll show you how much stronger I've become. I know many of you wish to see my peerage, but they shall be revealed during my first match, so instead I have an announcement I must say to everyone. This might come as a shock to you, so please brace yourselves. He breathed heavily before exhaling. The marriage contracts between Ria's Gremory, Akeno Himejima, Kaneko Taoju, Irina Shidu, Asia Argento, and Zenobia Quarta are hereby cancelled and will no longer happen. I cannot specify the reasons, but know that we had a dispute that resulted in this outcome. But don't let it ruin this grand tournament. Many people have come here to prove their strength, and it would be rude to all of them who worked so hard these past few months, so wipe those frowns off your faces. Cheer for your favorite team. Support them and give them the courage they need to stand tall and triumph to become number one. Many people were amazed by the speech, and everyone was silent until a clap happened. Many turned to see Issei's parents clapping at his speech, and then a few others joined in before the audience cheered and clapped as they were cheering for their favorite teams. Issei smirked as he knew he accomplished his task. He gave the mic back to Azazel before the fallen smiled at the boy's encouragement and spoke. Now for the first battle. We'll have a good old elimination rating game where both sides try to eliminate the other opponent's pieces, so let's meet our teams. The screen behind him shook as all the teams got mixed up and they began to circle each other until the results were in. Azazel laughed as he saw this. The first match is your Red Dragon Emperor versus Sona Citri's Peerage. We will give them a 15-minute break to get their team together and ready for the fight. So for now relax, have some fun, and if you want to ask Issei Haidu any questions then meet him when he's not fighting. The two left the stadium where they all cheered as they watched him leave. In the break room. Issei breathed a sigh of relief as he willed his balance breaker away. Man. I almost forgot how stressful it can be in front of big crowds, but it seems we got them riled up. Now to get the match started. Azazel bowed in agreement. But first, some people want to see you. He opened the door and Issei's peerage entered and congratulated him for the speech and show he put on. Undine was sitting on his lap as she explained the cool parts of the show. Issei saw his parents enter and his mother cried when she hugged him. Happy to know he was alive and safe, his old man gave him a comforting hand on his shoulder and a thumbs up to congratulate him. Undine was her grandparents and they hit it off very well. Mickey was ecstatic to see a beautiful girl in her son's arms, her dream of grandchildren is finally secured. Goro was happy to have a grandchild to spoil and they enjoyed talking to each other while they waited for the first match to begin. Outside the room was Sona Citri who was leaning against the wall and smiled as she heard the commotion. She left and pushed her glasses up as a glare appeared in them. A small smile appeared on her as she walked back to her team. Welcome back Issei. I'll make sure to give you a great fight. Ophis was in the stands as she watched through a disguise and smiled from the speech, and the way Issei appeared now was as if confidence and pride oozed off of his aura and body. She was happy he was back and ready to see what he can do. Rias and the others were shocked as they saw the match and were surprised by the announcement. They knew they would be having a lot of repercussions from the speech, but they had to see it through to the end. Whether they liked it or not. The boys were getting ready for their fight and missed the speech, except one. Ken was watching the speech through the Underworld app and smirked as his idol appeared at the games. He wanted to ditch the team, go to his idol, and shake his hand while apologizing for the trouble he and Asia caused for him. Ryuji was talking with Asia who had purple eyes as she explained the plan. Remember who you have to do. Ryuji nodded. Yes ma'am. I won't let you down. The Red Dragon has returned and the games are about to begin. Ria's Gremory was inconsolable. She was sitting in the corner of their break room with her back against a wall and her knees drawn up against her dot. Her mind replayed images of the last few months of her life. They were the happiest that she has ever known. Ice came to life and like a hurricane turned her whole world upside down, but in the best way possible. At first, she honestly didn't think much of him. Sure, he was kind of cute in a silly little brother kind of way, but she never imagined the impact he would truly have on her life. His strength, his determination and his chivalrous will. Those were the qualities that Issei had which allowed him to blow away the lingering darkness plaguing her peerage. He did the impossible and defeated the immortal phoenix to save her from a fate worse than death, in her opinion. He helped Udo bury his demons, he showed Kaneko that it was okay to be afraid of your power, but that she shouldn't run away from it because of that fear. He managed to pull Gasper out of his shell and allow him to once more be a functioning member of her peerage. He even helped Akeno get over the hatred she had harbored for years and show her true smile once again. Rias was ashamed to admit that these issues were things that she should have dealt with a long time ago, but due to her own personal issues, she allowed them to continue growing. Truly, a king in the making. But then she came along, and he barreled through all of their problems with the force of a freight train and blew them all the way. She could have tried, but it was impossible to resist falling in love with him. Sure, he was a colossal pervert, but she didn't mind that aspect of him one bit. If anything, it made him even more endearing to her as he never once tried to hide his true nature from anyone or pretend to be something he's not. His honesty and unthinking charisma just drew her in like a moth to a flame, and before she knew it, she was madly in love with him. It wasn't an easy road from then on though. Issei seemed to be completely oblivious to her advances, and looking back, she can see how she had missed the obvious signs of his lingering trauma. A woman in love can be a little selfish sometimes, something that they are rightly entitled to. But in this case, it had backfired spectacularly. She was so focused on her desires and her needs that she completely overlooked him. She just assumed that he would be happy to be with someone as beautiful as her and decided in her mind that they would be together. A lack of communication really messed up an already delicate situation. She still remembered the day she blew her top on in the clubroom. The combination of the stress she was feeling as well as the growing feeling of jealousy towards Ravel caused her emotions to boil over. She snapped at him over something as simple as what he called her. Looking back, she can see how stupid it was of her. She was the one who told him to always refer to her as "butchu," even when he used to call her by her name in the beginning. She expected him to magically forget that just because she wanted to hear her name from him. It wasn't really reasonable, even if Ice should have picked up on the signs she was giving him. Maybe it was also a bit of cowardice on her part. She was also afraid of the rejection she could possibly face. She could have confessed her feelings for him at any time, but she never did. In a way, she was afraid that he would feel the same way she did about Reiner. Her family did arrange them to be married when the two of them graduated from college after all. It wouldn't have been out of place to be outraged at the prospect of being forced to marry someone. She had felt those emotions not too long ago and knew how the resentment could eat away at you. But after the fight with Seirag, he called her by her name, and it made her so happy to hear his feelings for her that she couldn't hold back the waterworks. And since then, they were closer than before, but when the war ended, that's when things took a turn. Issei had been pushing himself so he could go to a more prestigious college than Kuo University, and she was okay with that, but also nervous since their relationship had been a bit strained since college and reality started to kick in. It seemed that Issei was trying to make himself better than before, and thinking back on their relationship, she didn't know what she had actually done to get better. When they talked, it just felt like he was drifting away from her and she was scared of losing him, but she didn't know what to do. That was until she had an idea. At first it seemed brilliant, but as Akeno, Reiji, and herself continued their relationship, it became more than a fake boyfriend. They actually started comparing him to Issei and began to badmouth him, which they didn't realize how consequential their actions may be. But now hearing him destroy the marriage contract was the final nail in the coffin that destroyed any chance of her asking or begging for forgiveness. She wished that she had been a better girlfriend and a better king. Asia Argento was sitting on the lavesiette across from Kaneko, curled up into a ball. Her shuddering sobs were the only sounds that could be heard in the room. Right now, she doesn't know what to do. The light of her life, her guardian angel, was gone. She felt so empty right now, like a part of her soul was missing. Issei had been the one to give her everything that she had ever wanted, even some things that she didn't even know she did. Even though Riaz was the one to reincarnate her, she understood that it would have never happened had it not been for Ice's stubbornness and his unquenchable desire to save her. To be her friend. To give her life and a reason to keep living. He believed that she deserved to live her life and make her dream a reality, and if that wasn't enough, he had sacrificed a majority of his lifespan to exact vengeance on her behalf when he thought that Shalba Beelzebub had killed her. Therefore, it came as no surprise that she fell unequivocally in love with him. No, it was even before that time. When Asia truly fell in love with him was when he became her first friend, when he wanted to save her, and he wanted to be there for her no matter what. But for Asia, just being by his side was enough for her, or so she told herself. But as the days went on, she became greedier. Maybe it was the nature of the devil that was affecting her, but she wanted more. She wanted more of his love and his attention. She wanted it focused on her. She thought back to the day when she said those horrible things to him in the park and felt a searing pain in her heart. She remembered the look of hurt that appeared on his face at her words when she yelled at him in the club room that time before he confessed to Riaz, but it was too late, the damage had been done. Ever since then, things had changed between them. When Issei left his home for those few months, she was afraid that if they were reunited, she would have lost that special place in his heart that belonged solely to her. As the days passed, she regretted the events of that day ever since it happened, especially when she lied to Ken about her relationship with Issei. But what hurt her even more was when she realized the trauma that Yus might have been carrying from what Reiner did to him. It made her feel horrible. She had so easily disregarded his feelings and his worries in favor of her own happiness. When had she become this type of person? And now it was too late. He was ready to leave her behind and continue his life. She would never get to say that she was sorry. She would never have the opportunity to beg for his forgiveness. She couldn't help but wonder if this was her punishment from God. Maybe this was her penance she had to pay for being so selfish, for being so ungrateful of what she had been given, that she so casually tossed it away like garbage. As the sobs racked her body, she fell into a silent cycle of despair and self-loathing, wondering if this horrible pain and emptiness would go away. Which was something Reiner truly enjoyed as she watched a girl drown in her tears. She laughed as if this was the greatest entertainment in the world. Now she only had to make sure that the girl didn't fail her in the tournament. If all else fails, she'll just possess Riaz and take temporary control over her. It wouldn't be the first time she had done it, and it wouldn't be that last. Hineko sat on one of the Levesiates in the room, staring blankly into space, her face more emotionless than usual. Her eyes, though, couldn't hide the grief that she was feeling. She remembered that she always only saw him as an unrepentant pervert who needed a serious beating, but as she got to know him, she realized something crucial about him. He wasn't just the shameless pervert that she thought he was. There was more to him, a greater depth to his beliefs that attracted her like a moth to the flame. He had an inner strength and conviction that he used to blow away the years of doubt and fear that she felt of herself and her power. He helped her overcome the trauma of her childhood, along with helping her reconcile with her older sister. Something that she would forever be thankful for. But most importantly, he gave her back the smile she had long since thought she had lost. Being with him brought a newfound happiness and joy to her, one that she would have never thought possible. She was hopeful of pursuing a relationship with him. He made no secret of his desire for a harem, and she had no problems with being part of it, as she knew he would treat her well. She also knew that her master, Riaz, had a claim on the lovable pervert. So it was sort of an unwritten rule amongst them that before any of them could further pursue their relationships with him, his relationship with Riaz would have to first be solidified, as she would act as the head of the harem. Which was why it was a little frustrating to see that there was almost no progress being made between them. Ice was as oblivious to his own charms as ever, and Riaz was far too afraid to make a move. It was causing no small amount of headaches and heartaches for the rest of them. Which was why they were a little snappy at him on that fateful night in the Kuo Park. Looking back, she can't help but be ashamed of herself at her behavior. While her frustrations were understandable, it was never any excuse to say something that could be construed as hurtful to someone, especially one as kind and caring as Ice. It was done in the heat of the moment, and she realized soon after that she had stepped over the line. She thought that dating another boy would give her the experience she needed to become someone better, but she knew that she would probably regret those actions for a long time. When Issei came back from his disappearance a few months ago, she was awestruck to see how strong he had gotten once again. The power that radiated from his balance breaker was something that truly shook her to the core. She was amazed by how different he looked. He still had the same smile and warmth from his aura, but the way he stood tall and spoke made her realize that she had ended up big time, and now there was no chance of her being with him at all. While she was bashing herself, a certain fallen was watching from the inside of another fallen. Ikeno Himejima was much the same way as Kaneko. She was sitting on a wooden chair, dead to the world. Her eyes were blank and she was unresponsive. She spent the entire time lost within her own thoughts. She wondered if it was her fate to lose the people that she loved. Whether it was to death or most times, her own machinations. She thought back to the years of self-loathing she endured. While she would forever be thankful to Riaz for all that she had done for her, Issei held a special place in her heart. Ikeno knew that, for all her usual composure and the facade she put up, she had this horrible habit of acting on impulse and making the worst possible decisions possible. This was evidenced by the way in which she handled her relationship with her father. For all those years, she could have been comforted in his warmth, they could have shared their grief together and grew closer over time. But she threw that all away. She could be forgiven to some extent as she was still a young girl at that point. It was normal that she had no way to deal with the horrors that she had witnessed and as such blamed the most convenient person possible. It wasn't something that she was proud of, looking back, but she had needed to do something like that or else she would have broken. As the years went on and she matured, she could have found a healthy way to deal with her emotions and rekindle her relationship with her father, but she bottled it all up. She hung on desperately to the pointless hatred that festered in her heart. But then I came along and he blew away all that negativity with his kindness and his compassion. Even though he was one of the best perverts she had ever known, he had a heart more than anyone could possibly imagine. He took it all. All of her hatred, all of her self-loathing and all of her insecurities and shouldered them on his back for her. He gave her warmth and love, he accepted all her flaws and put her on a pedestal that she never deserved. He even repaired the relationship with her father, the one that had been so badly broken, and had given her back her feeling of belonging. And before she knew it, she had fallen in love with him. When the incident in the room with Reiner happened, she was so caught up in the heat of the moment that she allowed all the impatience and frustration of the roadblock in her relationship with Issei and let it all go as she bashed the man and cut beloved Ice with the one thing that he couldn't defend himself from. Her words. While seemingly inconsequential to most, they had an effect on the pawn. His past trauma, his doubts and his own self-loathing, all of those festering wounds were the ones that the salt of her words rubbed into. She could see, from the hurt in his eyes, that she had made a mistake. But it was too late to take back her words. The regret from saying such hurtful things to the man she hurt was something that ate at her soul from that day forward. When he left for those few months, it was pure torture for her. She would wait every day, hoping she would see him again. Hoping that she could get the chance to say she was sorry, to beg for his forgiveness. When he finally did return in the games, she could instantly tell something had changed. He had changed. Not necessarily in a bad way, but not in a way that would make things go back to the way they were. He was a lot stronger, both physically and mentally. She could see it in his eyes when he looked at the crowd. She didn't hold the same place of reverence that she once did in his heart. She wasn't the great one Isama anymore. She was just plain old Akeno. Just another girl in his life. In most cases, this would be a good thing to her as she just wanted to be treated as another girl. But that wasn't the case. She was just another friend to him, no, not even a friend, just another stranger, and she couldn't stand that. After experiencing his love, his warmth, she didn't want to give it up. She was addicted and she never wanted to shake the habit. She told herself that she would give him time. Time to cool down and put what happened in the past. When he was at a good place with her once again, she would tell him of her feelings. She would beg and grovel for another chance if she had to. She would throw away her pride and her dignity, for those things never brought her any form of happiness, not like he had. But it was too late. He had called off the marriage contract. There was no chance that he would ever accept her. Now all she had left were the bittersweet memories that would plague her till the end of her days. She thought that it was a fitting punishment for a being as disgusting as her. She wished so badly that she didn't force him away from her. Middlet was grinning as she saw both the sadness, depression, and fear from the two. She licked her as she looked at the soul and was so tempted to just go ahead and be done with the fallen and consume her soul entirely. It would be so easy to just take over her body entirely and then take the poor kitty cat down. She drew back her hand before she touched it. But I know Ophis, and it'll be troublesome if I make her mad. Enjoy your last few days Akeno, and you better not lose, otherwise I'll have to reveal a trick from my bag. Let's see how Reiner is doing in Arena's body. Reiner had taken over the girl's body and used a mind control spell that she put on Zenobia to order the girl. Zenobia followed her as the two were wearing cloaks and went to see someone who they were meeting with. They found an abandoned area and went to the shadows. Hello. We're here. No one followed us. Tap. 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 I'm surprised that you were able to make it. Did you have trouble getting away from the others? Arena shook her head. No. It was easy getting away from them, especially those so-called boyfriends who fell for the old sob story. The figure stepped out of the shadows to reveal herself as Ophis, but she was definitely different from her little lowly self. This new transformation shocked Reiner as she saw the Ouroboros dragon of infinity. Instead of looking like a little girl, she now looked like an older teenager and had all the curves that came with puberty. Her eyes and hair were practically the same, but a small amount of dark black and purple eyeliner decorated them. She also had the Ouroboros symbol of the infinity snake shaped into a circlet-like diadem on her forehead. She even had infinity sign hoop earrings on each of her pointed ears. Her new skimpy armor was even more revealing than Reiner could have even imagined. Black armored thigh-high boots went up each leg. A similar pair of gauntlets covered her forearms and went up to her shoulders in some type of armored sleeve. Her shoulders now had snake-shaped pauldrons and a cloak attached to them which flowed behind her back. Over her waist, she was wearing some type of loincloth miniskirt, barely covering a noticeable armored black thong. She matching an armored midriff breastplate over her. If Reiner wasn't in the pathetic girl's body, then she would have had Ophis and begged her to take her for the first time there and now. Well, after Issei, of course. Ophis smirked as she looked at the full look that Reiner gave her, and she was hoping to get the same kind of reaction from Issei after reuniting with him. Perhaps she could use that to get Issei to take her on a date. Ophis held her right hand out and a snake came out. The snake slithered to Zenobia and slithered its way up to Zenovia's mouth and entered her body without any resistance. Zenobia had her head down as she looked like a blank slate until she raised her head and the infinity mark appeared on her forehead. Ophis smiles as she puts the girl to sleep. Thank you for the favor. I'm sorry, but I needed a way to make sure I can keep tabs from the inside, and who better than the dumbest girl in the entire Grimoire Peerage. She's already under your control, so use her well until you no longer need her. Reiner smiles darkly. Trust me. The only thing the girl is useful for is being my personal slave and weapon. She ed the girls and Zenobia ed as she was led by the fake arena. Reiner smiles as she puts her hold back on. We need to get back. The others will wonder where we are. I'll be sure to inform the others of the situation, and the fake Reiner is playing his part very well. Reiner sure knew how to convince the clone to betray its master. The Ophis nodded. Indeed, and do keep an eye on them. Make sure the plan goes off without any issues. We need the Gremory group to make it to the final four. If not, then it'll make things more difficult to do the ritual and expose their boyfriends. Reiner nodded as she lifted her slave and carried her back to the others. Ophis looked at them before checking the time. I should get back to the match. I want to make sure I get the best seat to watch the match. She vanishes back into the shadows as she smiles at a kind one as she wishes to reunite with him. Issei had gotten back into his battle attire. He chose who his pieces would be for the first fight, and they were excited about going up against their first devil Peerage. Issei remembers facing them when he was still with the Gremory faction, so he knew what they were capable of. Sona Citri was capable of water magic and was an excellent tactician, but she didn't know anything about other pieces that Issei had, so she would be trying to attack him first before taking on the others. Issei heard that Tsubaki and Kiba were participating as Sona's queen and her second knight. It made sense since the two wanted to have some fun and enjoy the fight. Tsubaki was a difficult one since her sacred gear was Mirror Alice. It has the ability to reflect magical attacks with double the damage on the attacker, but cannot be summoned twice in a row without a cooldown period. However, she's grown to be able to use multiple mirrors at once, but the problem is that it drains her magic even faster. And the mirrors don't work in physical attacks. The bishops were no pushovers either, and the two were a deadly duo in magic. Momo Hanakai has the artificial sacred gear Applause Wall, which has the ability to generate strong defensive force field barriers at will within a certain distance. The other bishop was known as Ryakusaka. Her sacred gear was known as Scouting Persona, which took on the form of a multitude of floating masks that can then be used for surveillance activities like searching for enemies, gathering and relaying information across long distances, and can also be made to act as a shield, but they were weak to any physical or magical attack. The knights were another story. Tomo Meguri wielded a katana known as the dragon-slaying blade of light and darkness. It was a sword that contained a mixture of both light and darkness, attributes with high destructive powers, and it possessed the ability to cut down spirits without physical form. Kiba on the other hand was no joke, since his sacred gears were a fused version of the blade blacksmith and sword birth. It allowed him to create demonic and holy weapons at his disposal. His balance breaker allowed him to summon holy knights with demonic weapons. By himself, he was a one-man army. Then came the only rook on the team, Tsubasa Yura. Her sacred gear was unique. It was called Twinkle Aegis. It created a giant shield that was made of light for defensive purposes. It could also be released towards the enemy while spinning while having fire and lightning surrounding it. It could also become a barrier of light while having flames surrounding it. The fairy within the sacred gear is also capable of changing its offensive and defensive abilities in accordance to the attribute of the fairy. Then we had the pawn Saji Genshiro and Raruko Nomura. Saji's sacred gear was the prison dragon's sacred gears, which consisted of multiple abilities, along with Raruko's sacred gear, which could strengthen the power and capabilities on the user's legs, granting them an increase in combat performance, such as greatly enhanced speed and immensely powerful kicks. It can also leave behind after images of the user to confuse their opponents. The balance breaker allows her to move so fast that others around her appear to be slow. They were a terrifying force to be reckoned with, but so was his team. He turned to the screen as Azazel explained the rules. Alright then, time to get the party started. For this battle, the elimination shall take place in a simple plains field. Who in the audience had ever seen Narnia before? A few replied that they have and a few shouted how they liked it. Well, the way the tournament will be working is that we will be having the events in different arenas that match the battle and will help either side take care of their opponents. So here we have the battle in Narnia. Kings, prepare for battle. Familiars can join the battle as well to aid their masters. The groups were teleported on opposite sides of the field. Sona looked at her team and saw they were on a grassy plain, with the sun beaming at them, and the wind blew past them as they turned to see rock formations that could provide cover for troops. The holographic screen was in front of Sona, and it listed the pieces she had and how many allies were on her side. She noticed that her knights were in armor and rode horses, as there were around 100 horsemen that were ready to do battle. Tsubasa and her pawns were in foot soldiers' armor and also had 100 troops with her that were armed and ready. Her bishops were in archer attire with a small squat, and Tsubaki stood in a general's armor, and her naginata was in her hands as she stood by her king. I have to admit, these uniforms look amazing on us. You should check yourself as well, Sona. A mirror was shown in front of Sona as she blushed at her reflection. Her figure had changed to where she stood taller, and her 3 sizes had changed back to her original. Her breasts were now an F cup and her height had changed as well. For reference purposes, look up Iris Heart from Neptune the animation. She was also in armor similar to her peerage and was alerted by a screech as she looked up and saw a hawk of water descend from the sky as it landed on her shoulder. The hawk had a note that said the other army was approaching them with greater numbers and forces. Sona got ready as she looked at the distance between them. They'll be here in 5 minutes, so we don't have much time. Alright, we need to split our forces. Tsubasa. Kiba. Have half of our foot soldiers and horsemen stand in the far back as reserves for backup in case we need reinforcements. Saji, Raruko, and Tomo will be facing the enemy with me and the other half of our army. Tsubaki, stand by with the other half and give the archers a message. She whispered in her queen's ear and she nodded before heading to the other half of the army. And prepared them for battle. 5 minutes later. Issei had decided to ride the earth dragon that he was given in the system instead of his ship. If it's a battle of armies they want, then it's a battle they'll get. Issei looked beside him and saw Panacea being carried by a warrior made of grass and dirt. Panacea had been concentrating on using her flora abilities so she could create creatures of the earth. It was a success when she turned the tree into a warrior to carry her into battle. Besides him were his army, his knights Karasuba and Toyotama were riding their own dragons that looked similar to raptors. The two were ready to enjoy this fight. His rooks that he selected were Yushima and Ichiya. The reason he chose them was for Yushima's hammer and gravity abilities. He had a plan to use power, and the bishops that he chose for this battle were Kitsu and Tsukiyumi, however they had their role to play, so Miya would be taking over the second part of their operation. They arrived to see the army in front of them, and Issei was able to see Sona in her war attire and her pieces that stood by her side. I expected Sona to use a maneuver like this. She'll have half of her army in the reserves while the rest of us charge the others. Also, her bishops are on the cliffs with their archery team ready to attack. The information from your surveillance was spot on, Panacea. Excellent work. Panacea bowed to him and then looked at the army. Shall I call them? Issei shook his head. No. Let's save it as a little surprise for them. He looked at Miya as she drew her sword. Remember the plan? Miya nodded. Yes, and I am ready to begin, as are a few of the others. They were getting excited for the fight, and Issei summoned Ascalon as he lifted it above his head and then swung it down towards them. Attack. Miya charged into battle, and the ones who were in her army charged as well. Karasuba and Toyotama were charging in as the rook stayed behind. The Kitsu and Tsukiyumi created wings of their element and flew into the sky as dragons of their elements were formed in the air. Sona and the others saw them coming towards them, and she raised her water sword before swinging it forward. The griffins on her side were flying into battle, and Miya saw them approach the battle. Bishops. Take out their air support. The two began to use the water and ice techniques to take out the air troops, while Sona and her army began to charge in towards the others. Attack. The warriors began to charge as they raised the Citri flag and made their way to the battle. Tomo has her sword ready as she charged the knights to take her out before many of their soldiers were lost. Saji and Raruko were charging at the opposing army as they readied for the fight they've been waiting for. Karasuba and Toyotama were ready as Miya and Sona clashed blades. The armies fought as the horsemen took out a few of the foot soldiers, while Saji and Raruko were facing many of the soldiers. Tomo leaped into the fray and clashed with Karasuba, and the Sekirei was excited. To meet you in person. I am Sekirei number 4 Karasuba. Also my master's first knight. Tomo smirked at her opponent. Tomo Meguri, General Citri's first knight. Prepare yourself. The two clashed as they fought with their blades, and their horses Earth Dragon were fighting each other to take out the other. Saji and Raruko were taking out a few soldiers until a spear flew and skewered 10 of the soldiers until it hit the ground. The one who approached the spear was Toyotama herself. The bodies disappeared and she pulled it from the ground. She lifted it before pointing to the two in front of her. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Toyotama, Sekirei number 16. She charged towards the two, and they leaped away until a blast of water hit Saji as he turned to see the water user from Issei's army approach him. Sekirei number 9, Tsukiyumi. Ice approached the duo as Akitsu stepped forward in her dragon form. Sekirei number 7, Akitsu. Saji had the absorption line fire at Tsukiyumi and it wrapped around her left arm. He smirked as he began to take energy from her. You're mine now. He grinned as he thought he took out the first member of Issei's peerage, but Tsukiyumi just bent the line and smiled a smile that scared the pawn. So you want to play that way? Let's see how cold-blooded you really are. Akitsu bent his head as she began to freeze him. Saji was going to use the shadow prison, but the cold was affecting him too much. Ice continued to creep up his body as Tsukiyumi ran towards him and hit him in the stomach before doing a few more to his face. If you want to dodge, then I suggest you release the absorption line, if not then enjoy being my punching bag. Saji was stuck in a bad spot and Raruko wasn't doing any better. Especially since the knight was fast, much faster than Kiba and was a master of the spear. She even used 2 spears to fight her. Raruko tried to stop her with her kicks, but the knight was very acrobatic as she dodged the kicks and punches, as if she was dancing like a ballerina, but without the tutu and stuff. Saji used the shadow prison while releasing the absorption line so he could move, but his legs and feet were frozen to the ground. Tsukiyomi covered Saji's head with water, and Saji held his breath as long as he could, but Akitsu kept freezing the boy's body and continued to freeze his legs and arms. You believed that we only relied on our magical powers like any other bishop, but you were wrong, and now you lose. The water led his head as his body was completely frozen. He fainted from the excessive cold and he disappeared. Sona Citri's first pawn retired. Baruko and Tama were so shocked that Karasuba and Toyotama took advantage of their state to finish the match. Toyotama readied her spear. A dark green aura surrounded her as she smirked at her opponent. But this staff of my pledge. Throttle all who seek harm against me. The spear flowed with the same aura that she had. Now fly. She threw her spear and it flew towards the pawn as it made its way through multiple soldiers who also kept falling to the other army. Baruko was stabbed in the butt disappeared. Sona Citri's last pawn retired. Karasuba kicked Tomo's stomach as she used a knife hand and stabbed the girls before using her sword and slicing off the girl's sword arm. Tomo screamed as she bent her arm before Karasuba stabbed her in the "You're finished. Thank you for playing with me." Tomo collapsed as she vanished. One of Sona Citri's knights retired. Sona looked to see her army was falling due to the power of their opponents. She sent a telepathic message and the bishop shot arrows into the air to strike their opponents and a few of the soldiers did fall and it was just the break they needed as Sona and her troops began to fall back to the rocks until the earth began to shake as the troops were unaware of what was happening. Creatures made of earth appeared out of the ground and began to drag the retreating soldiers and Mia watched as they fell one by one. She tapped her right ear. Phase 1 is complete. Issei smiles as he looks at them with the rest of his army. Excellent. Panacea, it's time to show them your true strength. Have the soldiers run them down. Panacea put her hands on the ground and sent energy through the earth. My soldiers of the earth rise up and strike our enemy for their foolishness. Show them no mercy. The soldiers born from the earth made their way past the soldiers and began to climb the rocks towards the archers. The bishops cast barriers to stop their advance, but Issei knew this would happen. Ichiya. Time for the second phase of our plan. Toyotama, we're doing the second phase. Retreat now. Toyotama leaped away from the battle and flew towards her master. The reinforcements had shown up and they were able to push back the dragon's forces temporarily, but they were slowly being overwhelmed by numbers. Toyotama lifted Yushima in her arms and took careful aim. You ready, girl? Yushima smiled back. Launch me. Toyotama threw her into the air and Yushima covered herself in her sky blue aura. Here we go. She spun her hammer as the size of it began to grow. With the hammer of my pledge. Shatter the enemy of my Ashikabi. She activated her gravity powers and launched herself down to the fight. Her hammer was lifted above her head and slammed it as she shouted. Gravity hammer. The force behind the blow to the ground was massive. The shockwave blew the ground up and as the ground gave out and many soldiers on both sides were being taken out from the blast, as were Tsubaki, Tsukiyomi, and Akitsu. They knew this was part of the plan so they didn't mind being retired. Issei Haidu has lost both bishops and Sona Citri lost her only rook. Sona couldn't let this go and looked at the army of earth near the archers. If she lost her archers and her bishops then they would lose a serious advantage. She summoned multiple water creatures to the army as she sent a water serpent to fight the earth creatures climbing the cliffside. Issei saw Kiba in the battle and decided to get into the fight. He got off of his dragon and spread his crimson wings before getting on all fours and launched himself right at him. I leave the rest to you, Panacea. Take out the archers as soon as possible. Panacea nodded as she looked at the barrier that was protecting the archers until she smiled. Toyotama. Have ready to launch. The two looked at her and were scared by the smile on her face. It was the scary idea that she copied from Issei and did a pretty good job mimicking it. Toyotama bedded Ichiya and lifted her as if she was a spear and threw her at the barrier. Ichiya was a bit surprised by the power behind the throw until she began to chant her Naruto. Legs and fists of my pledge. Crush everybody holding a grudge against me. She was covered in a light purple aura as she got into a kicking form. Then she began to spin. She spun so fast that she became a drill that was heading straight for the barrier. The bishops poured all of the magic they had into the barrier but were overwhelmed by the force behind the drill and it shattered to pieces. Ichiya was in between them and quickly took out the two bishops before Toyotama appeared behind her and the two started to fight the remaining archers as they tried to fight the duo, but the two Sekirei were able to help each other in either offense or defense. Eventually the two defeated them all. Sona Citri's bishops have been eliminated. Sona was sent flying from a punch to the face by Mia, who was hardly breaking a sweat. This is insane. How are you so strong? Mia revealed her dragon form as she looked at her. I've trained much longer and fought many more than you. You may have magical powers, but it's useless unless you properly know how to defend yourself against an opponent who doesn't always rely on magic. Mia sliced through all attacks and was about to cut down Sona until Tsubaki stopped her. Your fight is with me now. She looks at her king. Apologies for the late arrival, but Issei was facing Kiba and I thought you could use a hand. Sona smiles at her loyal friend. Thank you Tsukabi. She looked at Mia and her companion, Karasuba, as she approached them. Well. This is interesting. What do you call Mia? Just like old times. Mia drew her katana and Karasuba received the message and drew her sword as they both glowed in their respective colors. Mia was magenta, while Karasuba was black. May we have your names before we end this fight? Sona is her as she looks at her queen. I am Sona Citri, heiress of the Citri family and king of Team Citri. Tsukabi readied her Naginata. Tsubaki Shinra, queen of Team Citri. Karasuba smiles as she lifts her sword. As long as I live, I'll remember you two as worthy opponents. Mia gave them both a solemn nod as she lifted her sword. Thank you for a great match, but this is over. The four charged at each other for one final battle. Kiba and Issei were clashing with their swords. The battlefield around them was littered with blades and swords as the two rivals and friends fought each other. Kiba couldn't believe how much stronger his friend had become, but he wasn't about to give in. He still had one final card left to use, but with the way his body was, he could only use it for 60 seconds, and he had to make every single one count. Issei leaped away as he stared at his old friend before stabbing his blade into the ground. Kiba. Use what truck you have left. Don't hold back. Give it all your power. Face me at your best. If you have a trump card then use it now. Show me how much you've improved. Kiba smirked at his friend and held a plain sword in front of him. Magic began to come out of it as he chanted. I am the spark of battle. His power began to grow as he chanted, and all of the swords that were destroyed were turned back into magic that entered his wounds. They healed as the magic entered his wounds. Steel is my will and my heart is fire. I rule over countless weapons. Unknown to truth. Nor known to myth. He recalled the times he almost died from using this technique and practicing it for this moment. But no matter how many times he fell he got back up and was confident to train him off for this day. Watch this Issei, my friend, this is my true power. Through pain and trial, I bring power to legend. Yet, I shall still stand on the hill, forging for perfection. Demonic knights were appearing around him, and each was armed with both holy and demonic swords. Kiba opened his eyes as he looked at Issei. Confidence and resolve in them as he finished his chant. There are no regrets. I seek the ultimate victory. My soul is unlimited war works. Kiba was equipped with Gram and had multiple knights behind him as they were both a combination of holy and demonic. Each one held a sword that had both events within them. Kiba raised his blade and they all roared as they charged at Issei who stood still before smiling at him. He held his hand out as a portal appeared before him. Udo Kiba. You are one of the only few kings that I truly respect and I am greatly impressed by this new balance breaker you have achieved, but I'm afraid that this is the end. So out of respect as well as our friendship, I shall use my new sword and show you its true power. He extended his arm above him. Now pure and Apocrypha arms. A stage worthy of your power has appeared. The entirety of Issei's ultimate form had appeared and glowed bright red as it became a three-headed dragon that flew towards Issei's palm and became a longsword with the dragon head between the handle and the blade of the sword. The metal was red like blood and the gem at the end of the handle was green, while the dragon looked similar to Drake. He lifted the new sword into the air and power erupted from the blade as he used both hands to lift it high above his head and shouted as he sent one final look of respect to the knight. Now Dragon Emperor. He brings it down as they draw closer. Life Destructor. The strength behind the blast tore apart the ground as the dragon spun as the blast left the sword and destroyed the knights, as well as stabbed Kiba as he was enveloped by the strike. Thank you Issei, my friend, for giving this your all. I do hope you win the tournament. As he spoke his final words, he vanished from the arena. There was a moment of silence after the strike until it was confirmed. Sona Citri, Tsubaki Shinra, and Udo Kiba has been defeated. Team Crimson Dragons of Wind and Wings are victorious. Issei disappeared in a bright light and next thing he knew, he was cheered by his team and many others who were amazed by the match. Sona Citri has stood across from him with a smile on her face. She held a hand out to him. Thank you for a great match and I hope you continue to do well in this tournament. Issei smiled at her and shook her hand. Thank you for an excellent fight Sona. Your team definitely improved since that fight many months ago. Thank you and we'll continue to win. Sona was about to walk away until she remembered what the night Karasuba said. She walked towards Issei and bent his jacket collar and pulled him into it. That made her as she used a little tongue action. Issei was caught off guard and went back on instinct. The two end as Sona's new assets pressed against his and Issei's hands moved as if they had a mind of their own. His left hand reached down and squeezed her bottom, making her while his right kneaded her breast as she began to until their teeth were together. Mia and Karasuba knew that the girl had a crush on their king, so they would allow it. The others were resting after the fight and they were looking forward to the next fight. Meanwhile Ophis was rewatching the fight and she was amazed by the power behind Issei, especially turning his most powerful form into a weapon that he was able to use. She could see it. His power and strength grew with each fight and Ophis knew what had happened. Issei unlocked his aura and it was even greater than either Drake or Albion. Ophis smiles as she imagines Issei climbing to the top of the tournament and becoming a member of the top 10 most powerful beings. Her loins were getting from the thought of the two of them reuniting and becoming mates. The new feeling circulated throughout her entire body. Issei. My mate. Continue to grow and get even stronger. Show them who you are. And when the time is right, I'll show you how much I love you. The first round is over and the battle is really heating up. Issei and his group were having a celebration party for their first victory in the Azazel Cup. The Sekirei were waiting for the results of the quarterfinals before they reveal the top 16 teams who will move on in the games. Issei was talking with his father about his work and explaining the details of his work. Ora was impressed with how much his son had grown in just a couple of months, but then again with the supernatural and the Sekirei plan he knew his son would have won. Mickey was playing with Undine, who she had grown very close to just meeting and loved having a grandchild that she could spoil rotten. She knew her husband was happy as well, but let the two have their talk. Mia and a couple of the other Sekirei looked at Undine and thought of the idea of having a child with Issei. They have discussed it but decided to wait until the Azazel Cup was over so they could have a child in times of peace. Vali and his team were actually going up against Azazel's group of fallen against, surprisingly, a fishing competition. Issei was worried since Azazel was a 10-year champion in fishing, but Vali reassured him that they'll be fine. And sure enough they were definitely fine. The competition was decided by which team gathered the most fish by weight. The others watched the match, but what surprised them all was when Vali pulled out the king of the lake fish and won it hands down. The group was amazed and so was Azazel. He cried manly tears so hard that he hugged Vali, shouting of how he was so proud of him. The girls were given the fish they won as a reward, so the two teams decided to have a fish barbecue as a way for Azazel to meet the team and for the others to learn about the Sekirei. Seirag and his team easily won their fight, which wasn't much of a shock to Issei, since he knew that the Bay Layer would be one of the greatest trials in the game. Riser and Riaz easily won their battles, but it was a close one for Riaz, since the team didn't have their two strongest fighters with them. Kiba was one who was able to get stronger and aid his comrades with his numerous swords that he had in his arsenal, while Issei was a powerhouse and able to power through most of his opponents, but without their aid, it was much more troublesome. During the party, the door was opened by Sona, Tsubaki, her team, and Kiba. Issei welcomed them both, and his father left them so they could talk. Kiba and Issei just looked at each other at first, until they did a manly hug and a fist bump to show there were no hard feelings. Sona and the others were happy that Kiba and Issei were still friends and brothers in arms. Sona looked at Issei before walking towards him and betting his face. Issei was caught off guard by the act and noticed that Sona's face was flushed with a hint of red. "Are you okay, Sona?" She shook her head until she moved back before taking off her glasses and looked at him. Issei was caught off guard by the act, as well as the beauty enhancement from just taking off her glasses. Sona then put her arms around his neck and looked into his eyes. "Thank you, Issei. Thank you for everything." She then moved in and put her on his own, which shocked both parties. Aika was shocked until she pulled out her phone and took a picture and sent it to the school. Ravel, Yubaluna, Shulin, and Roswis came to celebrate the team's victory while trying to score brownie points with Issei's parents. Sona pulled back but was pulled in again by Issei, who fed her back, which made her feel happy. The two explored each other's mouths and enjoyed the closeness of being together, and right now they were in their own little world. Momo and Raruko nodded towards each other and begged Saji before dragging him to another room. Tsubaki was squealing that her friend was finally engaged and had a boyfriend. Hiba didn't know what to say except asking the $1 million question in the room. "So when's the wedding?" Sona and Issei pulled back and looked at him before smiling. After the game. Sona sat down on the couch in the room and put her glasses back on. "I know this might be a bit of a shock to you all, but this was actually what I wanted to happen to me." Tsubaki then explained to the others. Sona had a crush on Issei for a while since his junior year and was secretly jealous of Riaz but couldn't do anything about it. So she decided that when Issei gained his peerage and the upcoming Azazel Cup had been announced, she had a plan for her engagement. Sona took over then. I made a deal with my parents that if I was defeated by a king that is male in the games, then I would marry them, but I didn't want to face any of the others. I wanted to see how much stronger you've become, so I asked Azazel to pit us against your team. Issei was impressed with this. I'd give your plan a 9 out of 10. It was a good plan indeed, and I wouldn't mind dating or even marrying you, but I have to ask. Why do you want to marry me or even develop a crush on me in the first place? You know my reputation in the school wasn't the best one, and I wasn't that smart or charming that fit your criteria. Sona pushed her glasses back up before replying. The truth is that my mother sat me down and told me that I would remain single forever if I set my standards too high. You see, before I even met you I was already engaged to another high-class devil that was like Reiner before you beat him, but worse. I didn't want to marry him, so I had a plan to prevent any pervert from marrying me for my family or body. The game of chess to test their brains. And if one of them defeated you, then you would have to marry them due to the agreement that you set for your parents and yourself. Sona nodded. But then I met you and at first I didn't really see you as much. Issei felt a small stab but knew he deserved it for his past actions. At first, I pitied Riaz when she reincarnated you since I felt you would never have amounted to anything and that you were worthless without your sacred fear. She was scared when she felt the killer intent coming from Karasuba and a few of the others who wanted to beat the girl who insulted their Ashikabi, but Issei held them back with his aura. Sona cleared her and at her before continuing. But ever since you were in her peerage you proved me wrong on multiple occasions. I have no issues admitting that I was wrong. And looking at you now. She sighed as she rubbed her forehead. I can't help but feel regretted having passed you over and allowed Riaz to take you in her team. If I hadn't just relied solely on logic and understanding and perhaps looked between the lines, then maybe you would have been in my peerage. And as I watched you and the other members of the Grimoire team grow stronger, I saw that you were their pillar of strength and support. You were the one that carried them to victory in many of their battles. No matter how many goes there were, how much stronger they were, or even how hopeless it seemed, you never gave in to defeat. Even when others believed you were dead, there was a small part of me that believed you were still alive. And when you came to save us during the attack on Lilith, I saw your growth in power. It was at that time that my crush turned into one of love. No one said anything as Sona continued. I wanted to date you and get to know the real you, but when I saw you propose to Riaz and Asia, it made my heart ache terribly. There were many nights that I cried to myself for being such an idiot, for setting such high standards for my lover and putting a wall of stone around my frozen heart. It was then that I made myself content with just being a friend and an ally. At first, I was content with it, but then I kept learning more about you and my feelings almost resurfaced multiple times. I had to freeze my emotions and bury them in me because I knew you were devoted to Riaz and the others. I know your plan was to have a harem, but I was still envious of Riaz for having a part of your heart. And when I graduated from Kuo Academy and made my way into Kuo University, I tried to get over my feelings for you by dating others, and it worked for a while, but every time it stopped. Issei then went over to her and hugged her on the side. Sona bet his shirt and cried a little into it. The barrier that she set up for so long was finally coming down, and all of the emotions she had within her were finally being released from the depths within her heart. It wasn't the same feeling I had when I was touched by your warmth and kindness. I had been exposed to it many times and seen it help others during the war. It surprises me over and over again how you're able to save others when they don't need help. Then I heard how you were gone and left Kuo town. I was worried about you, but then Kiba told me where you went, and with what I learned from Riaz and what she and the girls did. A few Sekirei growled at the girls and wanted to skin them alive. Mainly Karasuba, Heihane, and Mia, but that wasn't the point. At first I was shocked that you made it into Shinto University, and then seeing you in this fight with my team, your new looks. And Aura that screamed Alpha Malay was worried you changed for the worst and tossed away your ambition and desire, but then during our battle you showed me that you grew as a warrior and a king. You led with courage, wisdom, and had the power to back it up. You were truly a king that will become a new heavenly dragon. One that soars to the top. Issei lifted her head by her chin and looked into the eyes. Do you truly not mind that it's me? Sona closed her eyes and smiled. I want it to be you. I accept you for all of you. Good and bad. Your faults. Your everything. She ended with a big smile that became so warm and strong that even Karasuba was touched a bit by the confession. Issei had heard all he needed. Then Sona Citri. I ask you. He gets on one knee and holds her hand. Will you marry me? Sona only replied by leaping into his arms and at him with all the love within her entire being. I do. For the first time in her life, Sona Citri finally felt love and completeness just by being with him. Serafal, Yusaka, Kuroka, along with Gabriel were happy for the young girl as they listened from outside the party. They would confess to Issei another time. For now, they would let the young heiress have this one. Later at the Haidu mansion. Issei was resting on the balcony that was connected to the rooftop. He and his team had decided to rest in Kuo Town for the duration of the game, so they could relax and enjoy a few dates with him. Sona had decided to stay with him, while the rest of her peerage went to their normal homes. Saji was happy but a bit sad that Sona didn't return his feelings, but Momo and Raruko had decided to show him how much they loved him, and he came out with a drained smile on his face, while the girls were glowing. Issei chuckled at the memory and looked at the stars. He enjoyed looking at the stars in the night sky. For some reason, he felt so relaxed looking at them and enjoyed the feeling he got when he looked into them. That was until he felt a presence enter the area. He turned to see someone he hadn't seen in so long. "Hey Ophis. It's been a while, hasn't it?" The new Ophis smiled as she looked at Issei in all of his glory. She wanted to enjoy being in his warmth and embraced him. Which is why when Issei patted the seat next to him, Ophis gladly sat next to him and put her head on his shoulder. "I'm glad you're alright. I've been watching you ever since I noticed that your aura seemed to fluctuate and your life essence seemed to be decreasing, so when I came to your room one night, I saw you were relaxed because of the angel Gabriel. I was happy that you recovered that night, but I was curious as to why the girls weren't there with you, so I did an investigation on them, and when I found out that they were hurting you behind your back, I was furious at them." Issei rubbed her head as he listened to her rant about her anger towards the others. Ophis loved it and put her head into his hand. "Issei, there's something that I want to ask of you." She turned to him and took the hand that rubbed him and placed it on her. Issei blushed a bit as he felt her and got a look at her new attire. "I've wanted to ask this ever since I learned what having this feeling means. When I looked into my memories and talked with others about this feeling, it was then I realized that I fell in love with you and that I wanted to be with you." She fed him and Issei was surprised when she dominated his tongue. Issei could feel the affection in it, but more importantly, he could feel an astonishing amount of possessiveness. "Issei is mine," said Ophis simply when she broke the dot. Issei was at a loss for words. "But you know I have others, right, and I can't deny my wives." Ophis nodded before looking at the rooftop. "Come out. I already know you're there." A few steps were heard and Issei saw Sona as she smiled down at her lover. My fiancé is dominated by the dragon god. What a scary combination. Mind if I join in the fun? Ophis nodded. "Issei can have the others, but I want Issei as well," said Ophis, confusing Issei for a moment. "So basically Ophis just wants to establish her place, I suppose that makes sense," thought Issei. Ophis then covered the three of them in her power and teleported them to a hotel. Sona made sure to leave a note for the others. She felt a strange power near the rooftop, but she wasn't expecting to see Ophis in a different look. At a special hotel. Issei and Ophis were in the room and as they appeared in the bed, the two began to share all of their feelings. Ophis willed her clothes away, revealing her bountiful are the Nakanos, while Sona took off her glamour and revealed her to Issei. Ophis put a sleeping spell on Sona so she could have her fun first before watching the two of them enjoy themselves. She then looked at Issei before pushing her forward. Her S were covered in pieces of tape that somehow made them sexier. "Show me your weapon. I want to be together with you in body and spirit." Issei nodded before he raised his hand to Ophis' end and removed the pieces of tape covering Ophis' S, revealing two dark pink nubs. Issei laid onto Ophis' massive mammaries and pressed his thumbs over the two little buds. "That felt so good," commented Ophis, her face was flushed red as she enjoyed the strange feeling that penetrated her body. "Does it feel bad?" asked Issei, absent-mindedly continuing his ministries. Ophis shook her head. "It'll take some getting used to, but in the meantime." She fed him as he continued to massage her. When they broke from each other, Issei licked her S and Ophis' eyes widened. "Aye," exclaimed Ophis sharply, her eyes rolling back slightly as her mouth opened in a cry. Issei smirked victoriously from around Ophis' right. Giving it another lick, Issei felt a sense of satisfaction at seeing the personification of infinity tremble under his ministrations. What was that?" asked Ophis, with slightly labored breath, her face regaining her normal disposition, only with a healthy blush across her face. Her ears twitched as she breathed heavily. "That was your sensitivity. Either because you always covered them, or because you only now became a true female, parts of your body are very sensitive," explained Issei. "Like this thing?" asked Ophis, firmly being Issei's and freezing him. "Why yeah. Like that," said Issei nervously. Ophis smiled coyly before she slithered her way down Issei's body and looked at the stick in front of her. Ophis poked the head with her finger, watching it sway in idle curiosity before getting an idea. "Ophis, what are you?" started Issei before freezing as Ophis wrapped her oversized breasts around Issei's member. "Both of these points are overly sensitive, so this should help liven things up, as you would say," said Ophis simply before sliding her milky bosom up and down Issei's. Issei clenched his teeth at how tight it felt. Issei was almost certain Ophis was using her shape-shifting abilities to create an airtight vise, which had him trapped inside. Issei's face flushed and he let out a soft smile. "Oh, Ophis," gasped Issei, but Ophis paid him no mind though, as she continued her actions, all the while, staring down at the flesh of Issei that kept appearing occasionally. Ophis seemed to nod to herself slightly, before leaning down and in the head, causing the appendage to twitch violently within her cleavage. "It seems the tip is the most sensitive," said Ophis before she tightened her bosom blockade, locking Issei's member in place, leaving only a swollen tip to see the outside world. Ophis then licked her before leaning down and let her tongue slowly exit her mouth before licking at the exposed flesh. Issei gripped the purple blanket they were lying on tightly as Ophis repeatedly licked over and over his most sensitive point. The softness of Ophis and the smoothness of her tongue brought Issei to the edge quickly, causing him to quickly release all over the flushed face of the second most powerful being in the world. Ophis released Issei and looked at the tip questioningly before giving it one last lick, taking the last few drops of sticky fluid that had been released from it. "Salty and creamy," commented Ophis before looking stoic as if she was in thought. Issei wasn't sure why, but seeing his face drenched in his fluids, coupled with her stoic gaze and calm analysis, was surprisingly erotic. Issei blinked to himself after a moment before realizing that without even trying, Ophis had turned him into putty in her small hands, and Ophis hadn't even been a girl for that long. Issei was about to take control, only for Ophis to position lower over him. "I believe it is time for the real union of us. Don't you agree, my mate?" asked Ophis simply, before sliding down and sitting on his sword. Her face had an expression that she felt true as she began to have a look of pure bliss. Issei gave a strangled cry. Ophis had not simply engulfed him, she had completely wrapped around every single bump and ridge of his. Ophis was truly a shapeshifter. Ophis then began to smile as she cried a little before she rose and lowered herself down on Issei, creating a strong feeling of suction as she refused to release Issei. Issei could not find the strength to fight back and simply let Ophis continue with her current actions, in too much to care at how thoroughly the dragon had dominated him. "Issei, please start moving too. This isn't a union if the mate isn't going to become one with me," said Ophis while looking at him with eyes that were begging him to become one with him. Issei looked up and saw his face was clean of his essence, and as she bounced up and down on him, she was jiggling in tune with her. Issei felt his rise sharply and sat up, wrapping his arms around Ophis's body, while burying his face left breast, firmly in and biting around the sensitive nub. Ophis froze for a moment herself, before picking up her pace tremendously. The continued sound of suction, while pleasing to Issei, was not what he wanted to hear. Even if he had accepted that Ophis had won this battle, he wanted her to cry out once more. Keeping his right arm around her back, Issei brought his left hand to her right breast and focused all his actions on the little nub, which was rapidly bouncing up and down. Issei gripped it firmly and gave it a strong squeeze. At the same time though, Issei lightly bit her left one. "And?" cried Ophis as she released her own essence onto Issei. Issei gave a small smirk in triumph, only for him to clench his teeth after a moment as Ophis continued to bounce up and down, not slowing down in the slightest and in fact, speeding up due to the increased lubrication. "Oh Ophis, what?" gasped Issei, but found he couldn't finish his sentence. Ophis at him fervently before panting like an animal in heat. "I'm feeling my lower half scream and I want to release together with you, so please," said Ophis, before picking up her pace again. Harsh meaty slaps resounded in the building as two dragons released all their desire. Issei had lost track of how many times Ophis had caused him to be released, having stopped counting after the 9th time. Ophis could have been a true sex machine if she wanted to, continuously releasing more and more fluids as she remained tightly gripped around Issei. Issei was able to get Ophis to cry out in joy before he had let his back remain on the floor, enjoying the sight of Ophis's bouncing hypnotically while her face was still flushed red because of the enjoy of being one with her mate. It was another 8 rounds after that before Ophis finally stopped her bouncing, remaining impaled around Issei as the duo both gave one final release. "Issei, release it to me. Make me pregnant with your baby. This body is only to be throttled by you," Issei responded by flipping her over, ending her lie before releasing his seed in her, which made her cry and scream in joy before Ophis slumped down into the sheets. Issei was playing with her hair before Ophis opened her eyes once again and breathed soft pants as she calmed down. Issei could feel himself completely calm now as well, but his partner was still standing at attention, which made Ophis's eye widened as she saw the length somehow increase, which made her very horny, but her body was too tired. "I think it's time for the Citri girl to have her fun with you. I know she'll want to become your mate as well." She pointed at Sona and she began to wake up. Her face was flushed as she smiled at Issei before shedding her clothes. She began to crawl towards him like a cat approaching her prey. "Are you ready? We can stop if you want," Issei asked her, but was then cut off by her. After breaking away, Sona smiled before laying down next to him. "Yes, my husband." You have no idea how long I've waited for the day that I can become one with you. She replied as Issei began to her. Issei was in her neck and moving down her body. That feels so good. Sona was feeling aroused as she surprised her. Issei was cute as he continued to do what he was doing. Issei then proceeded to let her heavenly bosom and thoroughly enjoyed the view of his wife. Sona blushed as she noticed how erect Issei was from just looking at her. Issei went down to her woe and began to lick her. Ah. Issei, she said as she felt Issei's tongue around her woe, then around her. Issei then had his tongue explore as it swirled around. Sona's S were leaking out as Issei tasted them. Sona never felt so exposed in her life. Issei, Sona called out as she couldn't wait anymore and wanted Issei inside her. She could feel her heart beating as she would be giving her to a man she loved so much. Here I come, Sona. Issei said as he slowly entered her. Sona was wincing in pain from her hymen being broken as Issei kept going at a slow pace till he was completely inside her. It's inside me. Sona said as she slowly smiled at him, giving him the okay to keep going. Issei started slowly as Sona began to Issei. She could feel Issei reaching her best parts. Son, it feels so warm. He commented as she was singing happily. She wrapped her legs around her waist as it started to feel good for her. Issei then lifted her up to a seated position where they began to passionately and their tongues explored each other. Sona's glasses fell off of her face and were caught silently by Ophis, who smiled as she watched the two before her. After they stopped, Issei then went back to her breasts as he started on them. Ha! Issei. Sona reaching her limit. Sona, I'm gonna come. Issei yelled as he released his essence inside her. Hhhh. Sona yelled as she felt his warm seed shoot inside her vest area. She had as well since she was releasing Hermes. The two ended before they separated again. Sona panted as she looked at Issei and vice versa for him. They saw the love in each other's eyes, and a small part of Sona was happy she was able to be with the man she loved and would give her life for. Issei saw the love in her eyes and made a promise to himself that he would protect that smile and make her the happiest girl in the world. Sona. I promise to make you happy. Always. Sona gently wrapped her arms around his neck and laid on him. I love you. Always. The two rested after having their intercourse and went to sleep. Ophis smiled at the two of them before putting the blanket over them. She wanted to be selfish and lay in bed next to him, but stopped herself. I'm sorry, Issei, but I can't tell you my plans no matter how much I want to, but know once it's over. I truly hope you'll accept me for what I'm about to do. Know that I love you. Ophis disappeared and left the room with a sad smile on her face. Once her plan was complete, she hoped that he would still accept her. Azazel and Ajuka were going through the winners and decided to go ahead and send out the results for the top 16. Azazel was looking back at the game with the Gremory team and noticed that there was something up with the girls. They seemed to be a bit stronger than before, but that wasn't the issue here. The issue was that the power from them was similar to not just a devil, but a fallen angel as well. Just what is going on with them? I'll have to get some samples. The next round will be a shocker with Issei Haidu's team versus the Greek faction's team. Issei and Zeus rolled again as the next matchups were made and were ready. The next matches would be held in different places. Perseus and Artemis were facing almost all of the pawns since Issei rolled a pawn in the night. Yahin, Areha, Pandora, Yomi, and Kacho were ready to fight, and they were transported to a plains field where Artemis and Perseus were waiting on a cliff while the Sekirei were behind some ancient ruins as they went over the plan again to make sure they were ready and on the same page. Poseidon was transported to a beach where he was facing the bishops Tsukiyumi and Kazuhana. The two Sekirei were summoning water and wind to their side as they prepared for a battle. Poseidon drew forth his trident and stood on the water and twirled it in his hand. Are you ready? Kazuhana smiled as she also made the winds fiercer. Indeed, we are big boys. Let's see who's the strongest user of the elements. Tsukiyumi smiled to herself as she prepared to show the foolish god before her who was the true master of the seas. Fight. Hera was summoned to an arena similar to one in Rome and was faced with the last pawn Heihain and the rook Benitsubasa. The Crimson and Indigo Sekirei were readying themselves as they prepared to face the Queen of the Gods. Hera smirked as she looked at them. Well, you two certainly seem interesting opponents. So come show me what you're made of. Her aura flared as she glared at the two before the signal was heard. Fight. Finally, Zeus and Issei appeared in a copy of Olympus itself, and the dragon couldn't help but marvel at the structure, even though it's a copy. Issei smirked as Zeus looked him over while he summoned his armor. I've never been happier at seeing someone as interesting as you, Issei Haidu. A human that was born with an incredible god killer within you and having been a low-class devil before facing many challenging opponents, but no matter how difficult the fight was, you kept going and never gave in no matter what. Issei smiled at the praise by the 9th strongest person in the world and thanked him. Zeus nodded in acknowledgement. I thank you Lord Zeus, but now is the time we talk with our strength rather than mere words. Zeus smiled as he prepared for the fight of his lifetime. Very well Red Dragon. Show me how much you've improved. The two smiled as the signal was heard and they charged at each other. Issei and Zeus smiled as they punched each other in the face. The fight has begun. Ken was watching the matches and was impressed before he noticed something was odd about Zenobia and Reiner since they seemed to be out of it lately. He followed them after the battle with Cao Cao and noticed that they were heading to the bookcase in the Grimory living room and pulled a book before it revealed a secret entrance and the two looked around before they entered and the bookcase closed behind them. Ken looked around before heading to the bookcase and found the same book and pulled it before heading downstairs and followed the hallways while remaining inconspicuous. He continued down the hallway until he saw an opening and took a peek before seeing Ophis and strangely Reiner, Zenobia, and the other girls talking to her. Now then that last fight was a risky one, but we were able to explain the situation with that burst of power, correct middled. Akeno's eyes changed as they became blue. She then giggled before squeezing her dot. You are correct Lady Ophis, those fallen will believe anything since it's Barkweel's daughter telling him, and the sweet and relief is that he actually bought it. The girls laughed until Rhea smiled. But we should be wary of Azazel. He's a lot smarter than any of the fallen and will probably try to find out what's going on, so we need to be careful. Besides that we're doing well in the game since we're now in the top 8. Rhea's placed her hands on her as she smiled. Soon we'll be together, Issei. Once more. Her chair changed to black momentarily before returning to crimson red. Ken was shocked at this and wanted to get closer until a hand was placed on his shoulder. He stiffened as he turned to see Kaneko. Nico punched him in the face and knocked him out. The office looked to see that Kaneko captured the intruder before recognizing him. Oh dear. We'll have to wipe his memory of this and make it seem like a bad dream. She waved her hand and the memory was gone from his mind. She smiled before sending the boy to his personal room. She looked at the girls before smiling. We're close and soon the ritual can begin and our beloved Issei will gain his prize that I spoke to him about. Now let's go watch him and his team. The girls retreated to the living room as Reiner, Calwerner, and Middleton enjoyed the idea of being close to Issei once more. Rhea's, Irina, and Akeno end as they fingered each other before they end each other. Rhea's and Akeno end as their breasts are mashed together and Reiner, in Rhea's, grinned before dressing herself in a sadistic bondage queen and pulled out a whip with a devil tail at the end. Calwerner and Middle shook in anticipation as Reiner neared them before grinning. Time to take care of my naughty pieces. Ophis smirked at them before turning the other girls to drones as they continued to watch the fight. Her heart beat faster as she saw Issei fight. She wanted to get this tournament done so she could have his children with his other wives. Back to the match. Issei and Zeus continued clashing as Zeus threw a bolt of lightning at him and Issei had to raise his arms up and protect himself from the full force of the blast but was sent back into a pillar that caved in as he hit it. Zeus complimented his strength before his eyes glowed and the clouds began to come together as lightning struck the area around them both. Zeus gave the boy a nod of acceptance before preparing a massive lightning dragon and sent it to Issei. Issei saw the dragon near him and knew that he had to pull out his trump card if he wanted to win. This fight isn't over yet. Issei clenched his fist as the boosted gear began to glow even brighter until Issei the crimson aura enveloped him. The dragon was about to bite him until the aura seemed to consume it. Issei chuckled at Zeus's shocked expression before he slowly stood back up and his armor began to repair itself. That was a good blow. Now it's my turn. His eyes turned green as he roared to the heavens and the aura grew as the armor changed. A silhouette of Drake was shown behind him until the spirit of the heavenly dragon became one with Issei and his skin grew scales and a tail came out of his back. Issei's eyes changed to dragons and horns grew on his head. The aura lessened as it became an armor for his entire body. Issei smiled as he looked at Zeus. This is a new power that Drake and I achieved after unlocking my aura. It allows me to unite with Drake and our souls become one, but doing this takes a lot of power and strength, so we can only use this for a maximum of 3 hours, but until then we are united as one. He summons Apocrypha arms and it transforms into a crimson dragon sword and a shield appears before him. Prepare yourselves god of thunder and wind. He then closed his eyes and a dragon's head tattoo appeared behind him. He opens them and whispers in an unknown language, but the message was sent to the others. Yuzum and Karasuba were panting as they were facing the god of war as he smiled at the two of them. They got a few hits in and the knight was more troublesome than the rook. He hadn't had such a challenge in a while and was grateful to have been in his father's team. Karasuba and Yuzum's eyes widened as they received a message and whispered back in a language that he didn't understand until the two looked at each other and Yuzum wrapped them in a cocoon of the cloth before she bedded Karasuba and they met each other. The black and pink wings appeared off of their backs and they chanted. By the veil of my contract, my Ashikabi's nightmares will be dispelled. By the blade of my contract, exterminate the sworn enemy of my Ashikabi. The two began to fuse as the cocoon held strong until it burst. Before Ares was a new figure. She looked like Kirisuba, but had long black hair with a hint of red, tied in a high ponytail, with her grey eyes. She wielded her sword as it seemed to give off a darker aura than before. The new figure also had a fur pelt over her right shoulder, which was split in two tails near the end. She seemed to be wearing a Demon Slayer outfit, but her version consisted of a dark blue kimono-like skin-tight jumpsuit, along with dark purple armored plating on her waist, left shoulder, and elbows. She also wore a light purple sash around her waist to carry another short sword. She also wore dark purple boots with light purple trimming and matching white fur near the top. The new figure opened her eyes as she looked at him and twirled her sword before pointing it towards him. "We are Setsuna. Prepare yourself, god of war." The sword flared with black lightning, and the new figure flared before charging in. Ares was getting more excited and charged in as well. "Let's keep going." Yomi heard what Ashikabi said and looked at Yahin. "Are you ready?" The Shadow Sekirei nodded before they ended, which shocked Artemis, but many of the guys in the audience liked it. They became one, and thus the woman before the goddess of hunt had a look of late 20s, with shoulder-length black hair that was left in a messy way and red eyes. For clothing she wore a red tattered cloak over her shoulders, with a grey short-sleeved dress shirt with a black waist cincher with red lace, along with twin long tails behind it, and was wearing grey wristbands, black short skirt and knee-high black heel boots. And finally accessories of 3 rings on her right hand with 1 on the index and 2 on the ring finger, as well as a black choker with a crooked cross-shaped pendant. The others did the same as Areha, Pandora, and Kacho didn't, but Kacho used her link ability and fused the 3 together, and a new figure appeared. She was a very attractive pale-skinned girl with lower waist-length blue hair that is bangs styled in a Heim cut, where it covers her eyebrows, along with 2 curved streaks at the side of her face, purple eyes and a bust that made Artemis feel saddened as she looked at her and compared them. The girl smiled before summoning a ring that would be mistaken for a hula hoop, but this one had a lot of blades with it, and she twirled it around before smiling. Her attire was similar to that of a punk girl. For appearance's sake, look up Tifa from Soul Calibur and the SCVI version of her. He smiled as she twirled it and smiled mischievously before glaring at the archer. "Prepare to die." He separated the ring and the halves became separate chakrams, and she threw them with chains attached to them. She laughed wildly as she let loose, while the other clashed with Perseus, and the 2 fused beings laughed as they let their battle loose on the battlefield. The girls' tails and heads were ready for round 2. The names are dumb, I know, but I put them down like that because of their personalities. They flip like a coin in the air. Tsukiyumi and Kazuhana were pushed away as Poseidon continued to use his water, but the water Sekirei stopped most of the attacks, and Kazuhana assisted by slicing multiple attempts by the sea god, but they just kept coming. The 2 revived the message and nodded toward each other before becoming one. The new figure was wearing Kazuhana's clothes, but had her hair similar to Tsukiyumi. Her body was very developed, and the eyes were a mix of blue and purple. She smiled as she held her hands apart, and the wind began to pick up, and she smirked as she looked at the god before her. "What do you say?" Round 2. Hera was recovering from a wicked left hook that was given to her by Benitsabasa and had to leap back from the claws of Heihain. Hera tried to stop the rook with magic, but the speedy pawn was slicing the ground and making it difficult for her to concentrate. The 2 worked well like a well-liked machine, covering each other's weaknesses and complemented each other's strength. Benitsabasa and Heihain were smirking as they were able to get a good hit on the queen until they received a message and laughed darkly as they prepared for the next part. Benitsabasa and Heihain got close as Benitsabasa at Heihain, and the 2 began to glow into pillars of red and blue until they combined, and the new fighter was born. She wore a kimono-like shirt with 1 sleeve missing, and a side ponytail had a few streaks of silver in the pink hair, which gave her an exotic look as well. It was held by 2 Daisy C. Her body was very athletic, toned, but not overly muscular. Her assets were around that of a D-cup. There was a studded black choker around her neck, and she wore black thigh-high boots. Her hands and arms were covered from the fingertips to her elbows by a pair of wickedly sharp barbed metal gauntlets, which vary in color depending on the section, being silver, gray, and black. She grinned before charging at Hera. Yum came out of hiding and appeared before her Ashikabi, and the 2 ed before wings of white light appeared from her back. "By the fists of my contract, I will protect my Ashikabi's heart from harm both physically and emotionally." Yum and Issei combined, and the figure appeared to be a female version of Issei, but with short messy auburn hair and light brown eyes. Her bust was around that of an F-cup, much to the guys and Kagari's joy. She wore the same attire that Yum did, but the armor also changed when combined. The armor will be the same as when Rias wore the balance breaker in the dimensional gap. Zu smiled at this and let loose of all his restraints. Now the real fight can begin. The 2 charged at each other ready to end this battle. Zeus and the fused Sekirei and Ashikabi were clashing fist to fist, lightning to crimson light. Those two fighters didn't back down for even a second. There is mutual trust between them, and neither will stop until the other one is down. Zeus and Issei clashed again and again until they were feeling drained from the fight. Zeus smiled as he spat out blood and charged himself up with everything he had. Issei Haidu. Prepare yourself for all of my power. The electricity flew from the sky and entered Zeus as his body began to glow so bright that he became a living thunderstorm. He raised his hand and a lightning bolt formed in his hand and cackled so much lower that the ground was tearing itself apart. Issei and Yum saw this and decided to go all out as well. They raised their arms up and boosted their power to the maximum limit and used explosion to release all of the power. Light was flowing in their hands and they glared at Zeus, who glared back. Let's go. They charged their finishing moves and then released them. Zeus threw the spear of lightning and yelled, "Holy smite." The spear flew towards the fused being, and the sky and ground tore up as it kept going towards its intended target, but they just smirked until they summoned the cannons on their back and aimed it at the spear. The crimson aura was generated in the cannons, while the fused being was generating a giant ball of light in their hands. They aimed it at the spear and yelled, "Now, go beyond." They punched the ball out of their hands and the cannons fired. The two beams flew toward the spear and clashed with it, but the beam overpowered the spear and destroyed it. Zeus was shocked until they shouted their fusion blast. Final dragon shot. Zeus roared in pain as the beam enveloped him, and the beam kept going until the energy died off. Standing in the battlefield, Zeus hobbled over to the red dragon and put a fist to them as a sign of respect. "You win. Issei Haidu. Thank you for a wonderful match." The god of lightning was sent out of the game. Issei and Yum separated as they passed out from exhaustion and rested in each other's arms. Drake was proud of his host for becoming stronger, and now it was official. Issei Haidu. Age 18. The 9th strongest being in the world. Azazel smiled as he saw this and nodded. This was insane. Just when it looked like Zeus was about to win, Issei and Yum pulled out a win and defeated him. Colonel Cossack laughed. "Ha. I could have easily beaten Zeus with my arms tied behind my back and my eyes closed." Azazel smirked tauntingly. "Oh really? Care to prove it?" The colonel freaked out and faked coughing. "Well, we should check on the other matches." Azazel laughed as he responded. "Good save. Let's take a look at who's won so far. Ares and Heracles vs Karasuba and Yuzum. Draw. Artemis and Perseus vs Yahin, Areha, Pandora, Yomi, and Kacho. Win for the Red Dragon. Poseidon vs Tsukiyumi and Kazuhana. Win for the Greeks. Hera vs Benitsabasa and Heihain. Win for the Red Dragon. Zeus vs Yum and Issei. Win for the Red Dragon. After looking at the results, the victory of the match goes to the Red Dragon team. They will advance to the top 8. Now let's take a look at the next few matches before this one. The colonel smiled as he took out his popcorn. Yes, let's look at the many crushings. I must record them so I can watch later. Azazel liked his friend's enthusiasm before continuing the replay. Vali and Sayarag fought like titans and didn't back down for even a second, but in the end Vali's team managed to pull a win thanks to the Juggernaut drive. Then Ria's Gremory and Cao Cao were fighting with excellent strategies and using their powers to the limits, but Akeno managed to pull a win thanks to the Holy Lightning. Lastly, Riser Phoenix's Peerage was going up against our very own Surzich's Lucifer, but sadly as hard as the Phoenix clan fought, they were no match for the mass deadly power. Colonel sighed. Such a shame. And they were a lot better than when they fought Ria's Gremory's Peerage the first time. You're correct there, Colonel. But it seems that we have a bit of an issue here. Many of the other teams have taken out each other or cheated against the rules, and since we only have 4 teams who actually followed the rules, we'll have to allow the last 4 teams to advance to the semifinals and decide who'll be in the finals this Azazel Cup. We'll send you the results and who will be facing who in the semifinals. Until then, good night and get some rest. These 4 fighters will give it their all in these next matches. Hi to residents. Issei and his team were celebrating their win, while the Greeks were congratulating them on a well-deserved victory. A few of the Sekirei got along with the gods as well. Karasuba and Ares wanted to challenge each other again in another fight. Yuzum and Hera spoke of fashion designs. Zeus and Issei were speaking of the power that the dragon used in their battle. After the celebration party, the Greeks headed out but promised Issei that the next time they fought they would be the winners. The Sekirei group were excited and saw them off before cleaning up the party. Yuzum smiled as she sipped her E-man. That was a blast. I think I've gotten my workout for the year. Karasuba laughed as she heard the girl. Oh please. I did most of the fighting while you were on the sidelines. Issei sighed as he was cleaning the dishes and Yum hugged him from behind. That was an amazing feeling. Being one with you was a rush I've never felt before in my life. I was happy being with you in the fight and I saw how much strength you have. I understand why many people follow you. She looked at the others as she spoke to him. It wasn't just because of your sacred gear or your power. It's how you used it that drew them towards you. You never stopped trying to get stronger, but you didn't lose your morals. You never asked for any reward after the battles you've done. You drew people towards you due to your kindness and compassion for others. That's what made you special. It's what drew all of us to you, and we're happy to be with you. Issei smiled as he put down the dishes and ate Yum. Yum ate as she went back and her wings came out of her back. The two ate as they continued until the need for air separated them. They smiled as they looked into each other's eyes. Kagari came in and sauntered her way over to Issei before wrapping her arms around him and nuzzling into his back. You're so warm. It's like being wrapped in a blanket. Issei chuckled at the affectionate Sakurai and rubbed his hand along her ash-gray hair. It's hard to imagine you were against me being your Ashikabi. Kagari poked her fingers with a blush as she unwrapped herself from him. Well, it took me by surprise, and well, Issei just hugged her, and it made her happy. Mia came in and hugged her husband as well until they separated. So how long will it be until we receive the results for the next match? Issei scratched his cheek with his right hand and pondered. I'd say a few days. Around 3 or 4 at most, but until then it is best we rest, since many of you are probably tired from the fighting today, so why don't we get some rest? Sounds good. The others nodded, and a certain Sakurai's eyes glinted a bit as she looked at her Ashikabi. She had to personally thank Matsu for the drug she made per her request. She chuckled as she smiled to herself. I can't wait to experience your other side. Morning lemon approaching. Your reaction. Issei was stretching in his pajamas and was about to go to bed until a knock was heard at his door. Issei went and opened it to see Kagari was behind it. She was in her favorite nightgown and smiled at him. Mind if I come in? Issei nodded as he let her in. Kagari walked in slowly while admiring her Ashikabi's room before turning to Issei. Her cheeks were flushed and tinted with pink until she asked. Have you ever been turned into a girl before? Issei rubbed his head and shook. Well no, but Azazel did make a gender swap gun that would last for 24 hours, but it was destroyed in an accident. Why do you ask? Kagari walked to him before she pushed him onto his bed beforeing him. Issei welcomed them, and the two tongues wrestled as they fought for dominance. They continued to do so until Issei felt a strange sensation. His body groaned as he felt 2 orbs appeared on his and his bottom more squeezable. Kagari liked what she saw and was panting at Ashikabi's female side. Issei ate as his hair grew longer, to the bottom of his neck. His eyes became more gentle while his face was more feminine. Issei's eyes closed after the transformation until she opened her eyes and saw her transformed body. Issei took off his pajama shirt and was amazed by his new outfit before playing with it for a bit. She looked at Kagari, who took off the nightgown to reveal her birthday suit. Issei had a feeling this was something Kagari wanted since the fight and cracked a wicked smile. So you wanted to see my female side? Were you turned on so badly that you wanted to see my female persona in the fight against Zeus? Kagari's eyes hypnotically looked at Ashikabi's body. She edged her as she nodded timidly. Issei took off his underwear and was still surprised to see that he still had his dot. So you still wanted me to be amazing as both a girl and a boy? Kagari nodded as she wanted to the one before her. Issei flipped their position so that Kagari was in the bed while he was on top. Kagari blushed as she saw Ashikabi's eyes look down. I'll show you just how dominant I truly am. I hope you're ready beyond your imagination. Good. Now then, I haven't had my fill. Issei whispered into his Sakurai's ear, pushing back into the girls to ravish her even more. They were enjoying this so much they never noticed the teddy bear on the desk had a hidden camera in it, as a certain perverted glasses was blushing and giggling loudly as she recorded the events that took place in the room while also writing down notes from her gender swap drug that she gave to Kagari for testing. It seems that my experiment was a success and he should be back to normal in a couple of hours. I'm still a bit curious about this change since it appears that he's more dominant. It's probably because of the mixture of the hormones in his body. Thankfully he can't get pregnant, but still seeing this was amazing. She said as herself as she was turned on by the intense lovemaking happening before her eyes. The office was surrounded by the bodies of Rias, Irina and Akeno. The girls were and edged softly as they relaxed in the warmth of the sheets. Ophis truly enjoyed the makeout session that she had with the girls and wanted to learn how to have sex so she could have experience with her mate, which helped her greatly when she reunited with her mate. Ophis lifted herself off from the bed and went to the patio. She looked into the night sky and smiled as she placed a hand over her stomach. She cried about while also smiling as she felt the life inside of their stomach move a bit. Ophis then patted the belly and spoke softly. I'm sure your father will love to meet you soon. My sweet boy. Ken Haidu. Ophis giggled as she and her mate were parents with their son. It made her happy when imagining it and saw the clock strike midnight. Ophis turned to it and smiled. A dark grin appeared on her face as she faced the moon. It's time for the final 4 to fight. Issei, my love. Prepare to fight with all your might. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the Nefarious Doctor for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.